Los Angeles Unified School Authority or whatever it's called. And it was just before they went on strike, but it talked about the problems that the school district has. And I don't know whether this statistic is right. I read it numerous times because I was so surprised by it. 80% of the families that use the Los Angeles public school system are at the poverty level or below. And that means, of course, also that they rely on the free meal assistance, right, that the schools provide, which is kind of what the point of the story was. Like, the schools are closed right now, and so kids aren't getting a chance to eat because that's their only chance to get to eat. Right. But that number was stunning.
That's crazy.
Right. So I meant to look into it and do more research to see whether the article was actually correct or not. But hey, it was in the newspaper, so it must be true, right?
I don't know about that.
Anyway, yeah.
That's a disturbing number.
It's a very disturbing number. But it also talked about how 12% of all kids that go to high school here in Los Angeles then go on to college, 12%. And it was a similar number that never get out of high school. And it's even worse in a place like New York City, public schools. So I guess the point being is the public school system is
it's dog shit.
Yeah, and in the larger urban centers, it's got some real problems.
And I think a lot of those people that are, the really sad thing is a lot of those people that are at the poverty line or below work hard. It's not a lack of motivation. It's they just don't have opportunities. They don't know what to do. They're not doing it the right way. They don't have guidance. They never learned correctly when they were young.
Maybe single parent. They're working
single
2 or 3
parents,
jobs. And no, but look, California's got all sorts of interesting issues. I mean, there's, I talking to some folks, and they said a quarter of the nation's homeless people live here in California. 25% of the nation's homeless people live in California.
Smart place to live.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's raining the last few days, but most of the time,
it's beautiful weather. Hey, you can't complain about the weather anyway.
That's
but
crazy.
That is crazy. And it also talked about how a lot of those people, they work, but they're homeless, right? The cost of housing. And so you've got people that have a job, but they're living in their cars, right? Because they can't afford housing, whether it's in San Francisco or Los Angeles or wherever. It's
insane.
Yeah.
That place is insane.
So your point about the basic universal income, I take that point. I see what that, if it was possible to pay for it, and again, kind of do this thing where you're monitoring this issue of motivation, so you're not creating another follow-on generation of just complete slackasses, then I think that's a really valid point.
My concern would be people that didn't appreciate it and people that felt entitled. Like they felt like someone owed them that money.
Yeah.
And you're going to have that. I mean, this is the biggest problem that people have with socialism and socialist attitudes, that some of these kids that are coming up right now, they look at what they call income inequality. What they don't look at is effort inequality. Like, some people put in more fucking work.
Yeah.
It's not and are smarter. They've figured their way through the game better than you have.
Yeah,
and they've been doing it for 50 years or whatever they've been doing it for.
Right. It's not.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more in the sense that I never begrudged anybody. I never got pissed off with a rich person because they were rich, right? I'm thinking, hey, that's good. I'd like to be rich, right?
Right.
So I might want to talk and find out, hey, how'd you do it, or how'd you do it? And yeah, it's a system sometimes, set up so that once you have some money, you can get more money. Well, of course the fuck it is. Yeah. I mean, if I have some money, I can invest that money and make more money.
Yeah.
If I'm smart about it.
If you do it right.
Yeah, if you do it right. But I absolutely, I don't begrudge the idea. So that's part of it. Is also, I'm fairly steeped in the idea that, we're living in a very unique country, right? And I do worry sometimes that people don't, even family, and I've got some friends and others who are just constantly pissing and moaning about this place, right? And I'm thinking, I spent almost all my life over in shitholes around the world, and there is no other place I would rather be as a country. And I know that's it's jingoistic or whatever, but honest to God, I still believe, and if you go someplace and you talk to somebody in some fifth world, they will also, my experience has been anyway, maybe you're listening and your experience is different, but that's the way it works, is that they'll think, if I go to America, if I can get to America and I work hard, I can be successful. And that, I think, is still true. And that's what I worry about with entitlements and things that may kill that belief. And you're right, income inequality.
Yeah.
You're right. You work harder. Now, it doesn't always happen, but life's not supposed to be fair. Maybe it's supposed to be fair, but it's not fair. So, sorry.
Life is just supposed to be life.
Life,
It's definitely not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I completely see your point, and I agree with it. I think that the real concern is that people don't appreciate already how great they have it and what incredible opportunity they have. And if we give them more benefits with less effort, then you're going to develop more of this attitude that we find disturbing, which is people that don't have an appreciation for literally the greatest experiment in self-government the world has ever known.
Yeah. No, but I think also that there's parts of it that need to be looked at. Like there's an interesting study about college and graduation rates from college for disadvantaged folks, and that was again why they made it easier for tuition assistance, right? So the idea was we want to expand the college ability for everybody, which is a great idea, right? But what they found was they expanded the college opportunity for everybody, but over the past decade and a half, fewer people from the lower income categories have been graduating. Right? So what you've done is you said, come on in. It's like, it's like special operators, right? If you lower the bar,
Right.
And this is where I'm going to get in trouble. Probably I'll talk about the Marines and allowing women into combat elements. I know. Oh my God. Well, what do they do? Well, you lower the bar. You make it okay. Well, not enough of them could get through the course, so I'm going to change the regulations.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you change the regulations, what they found with the college was if you increase that pool of people going, it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful, right? And now what you've done is you've kind of saddled them with some college debt, and they didn't graduate, so they're still earning what a high school graduate earns, and the system doesn't work. And so I think sometimes just the idea of throwing money at the problem or it's not helpful if we don't think it through and then assess the results. So. But yeah, that whole Marine experiment.
I think they're catching it late in the chain, and I think it's good to give people the opportunity to succeed and to advance themselves. But if you really want to address it as a systemic problem, you got to get to the root of it, which is these unbelievably horrible neighborhoods and these toxic environments that these kids are growing up and being abused and being scared and bullied and terrible piss poor education, first through all the way up to high school. That's really where you have to address it. Addressing it just at the college level and giving them the opportunity to get into college and making it easier for them, it doesn't negate the terrible foundation that's been laid by their life.
Right. Yeah, and I think we had this idea that college should be for everybody, right? Yeah. And that's okay. That's great. And I think that's where the people like Cortez and Bernie Sanders and others with their idea of free tuition.
Yes.
They're thinking, okay, well, look at Europe. There's some countries in Europe have free tuition, and hey, it's it's relatively prosperous, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I think we don't assess the cost and the overall efficiency of an idea sometimes, and so we just assume and open it up, let everybody go, and somehow this is going to work, right, to our advantage. And the honest to God answer is no. I think somebody is better off sometimes, going to, becoming a plumber, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
it's an honorable living.
It's a great living.
Great trades.
It's a great living. One of the happiest guys I know is my plumber. And boys, that guy is, he's got it knocked, right? He's always out for hunting season. And he'll call. I'll say, look, I got a leak, right? My ceiling's about to cave in. He goes, well, I'm going hunting. I'm sorry. He's just got he's got his own schedule, right? But he's got a great job, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we developed this idea, sort of like home ownership. Everybody should own a home.
Right.
Well, we saw where that took us, right?
Yeah.
When you lower the requirements, and suddenly we're all, it's blowing up and we're fucked. But anyway, what do I know? What the hell do I know?
What do I know either? But I see your points, and I know what you're saying. I think that one thing that disturbs the shit out of me is student loans. One of the worst ways to prepare a kid for the future is to saddle them down with $250,000 worth of debt by the time they graduate from college.
Right. No, absolutely.
And then they get a $50,000 a year job, and they're like, what in the... And they're doing well with a $50,000 a year job. That's a great job to get out of college, and you just look at the debt that you have, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
How am I going to pay this shit?
Yeah, no, I know. And we have sold the students a bill of goods.
Yes.
And and some of it, okay, some of it's on them, right? Some of it, the older students are the ones who are willing to take out this loan, and then suddenly they're using the money for something else. Okay, fine.
Right.
There's individual responsibility, but no, I agree with it. The student loan debt is a major issue. We occasionally, the Capitol Hill talks about it, but not really. I told my daughter, who's a fantastic person, I said, the biggest gift you're getting is getting out of college without any debt.
Yeah.
That's, so, Dad's not going to buy you your own Wagoneer. You gotta get
your own Wagoneer.
Yeah, your tuition, and that's it.
Look,
that's the best I can do.
That's a gigantic head start for kids.
Yeah.
It sounds so fucked up, but it's true. To not be in debt is gigantic. Look, they're giving kids credit cards and their frontal lobes aren't even developed yet. They're doing all kinds of wacky. They're like, well, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Like, you ain't figuring out shit. You never figured out things up till now. And the idea that you're going to get magically smarter over the next 6 months while you owe all this money is crazy.
Right. Do your kids, do your oldest have a phone yet for security purposes? Or
what is this? What do you got here, Jen?
Student loan clock.
Oh my God.
What is that? I can't even figure out what that is.
1.6 trillion.
Oh my
That's a
God, look at
trillion.
it go. Oh. Wow. So what is this website that people can go to?
This collegedebt.com. I just typed in student loan
Holy
clock.
shit.
Debt clock.
Look at it rack
that.
up. Look at that.
That is an insane amount of money.
3,000 or
mesmerizing.
so a second.
Is that what it is?
That's what I'm looking. I'm just kind of guessing off what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's an insane amount of money.
So you just made that number up.
Stuff of what I'm
Okay.
looking
No, I
at.
know.
Look at credit cards, auto loans. Is that credit cards and auto loans for us, all of us Americans, or students?
Yeah, and then
Because it's all credit card debt.
what I just looked at too on another page that had a clock. This is the same number. It's not including the interest on the federal
Good God.
loans. Just
That's
Lord.
crazy. So you look at that and you think, okay, no wonder it's a popular idea of saying you got to write down student loans, you got to get free tuition going on,
Yeah.
and do all these things. And I again, can the country pay for it? I don't think so. Should we be talking about it? Absolutely. Should we be looking for other alternatives and other options? Yeah, but I think it's we're not even willing to address the issue of Social Security and Medicare, and trying to deal with entitlements as they currently exist, which we
Yeah.
know are going to bankrupt us at some point. Right? We know
Right.
that. It's not a mystery, and we can't deal with that. So how are we going to deal with these other issues?
Well, that's the question I had about a guy like Trump, who doesn't seem to like to pay attention to things. How the hell is one person supposed to be in the director of all these various aspects of our world?
Yeah. No, I've heard that. From what's his name? The economist. I can't remember his name, but anyway, very, very smart guy, very smart economist, who was talking about this and saying, this is what we expect of a president. Think about all these things that the president has to be cognizant of and supposedly capable of digesting a lot of information and making decisions on a very number of things. And obviously, you delegate and you do fine. But it is an interesting system, and it is interesting how, right now, there's a lot of people that don't have faith in the current president to make, some of your basic decisions. Previous administration, there were a lot of people that was convinced he could, understand anything, right? I mean, he was, capable of all of it. So I don't think the job itself is too big, right? I just think that, the way that we go through the selection process has slowly, over a period of time, gone downhill, and has kind of resulted in what we're doing right now. Part of it's the bullshit primary process, and the way that we do the initial selection. There's a lot of things, I suppose.
Sure, the fact you have to be registered as a Democrat or Republican to vote in the primaries and all those things. And then, it's just everything. Like the whole thing's a big mess. But on the flip side, here's what's crazy. Trump doesn't seem to be aging. Everybody else
really? You think it's
ages so hard.
Yeah.
They age so hard because they're paying attention to everything and they have real concern.
Well, yeah.
He seems to be just like a fucking water on a duck's back.
Well,
just
maybe he's going to outlive us all. Maybe he's figured out how to avoid the stress.
He
right?
doesn't seem any older.
Yeah. Oh, you remember what President Obama looked like when he finally walked out of office, or Bill Clinton? I saw Bill Clinton not too long ago. We were down in Little Rock, and
You saw him?
yeah, he was at an event that we were. It was a relatively small dinner, and
Was he chasing pussy? Don't
Well,
lie.
yeah.
Don't lie.
Yeah, I'm not saying he touched me inappropriately, but Want to know where I got my burner
I would
phone.
love to be a fly on the room, a fly on the wall in a room with that guy.
But I will say this much about him. He was, we started talking. I thought I was just going to go up and shake his hand and say, hey, Mr. President, good to see you. Because I always liked the guy, right? And okay, aside from his obvious, issue and the problem he had, in terms of his ability to govern and the fact that he's a smart son of a bitch, and he, I just found him, capable of the job, right? Just like I did with President Bush, and there were good aspects of President Obama. I don't have a dog in the hunt, right? I mean, I'd rather see the results than the person. But anyway, talking to President Clinton, we started talking, and he immediately went to an old agency operation, an old thing that had happened during his time when he was president, to talk about it, right? And you could tell that he had retained a tremendous amount of information, right? And we were talking, and we ended up talking for 15 minutes or so, just kind of about this particular incident. And he was kind of curious, and he wanted to recount kind of some of the thought process that they were, going through. And I found it really interesting in the sense that it was a surprisingly deep conversation, right? And he's curious, and I always thought that was the most important quality for anybody who gets in that job. They have to be curious, right? They have to be inquisitive. And, on the scale of, presidents, where does the current president, exist in the curiosity scale? I don't know, but I think that's probably not his strong suit. So maybe that's one of the reasons why he's not aging, is because he's not asking that fourth or fifth question that leads you to the point where you go, oh, that's a pretty fucked up situation. Now we got to worry about that one.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it is, water off the back, and he's figured out a way to deal with stress.
Well, on the plus side, he seems to be making business owners happy. It seems, at least ones that aren't affected by the sanctions against China, because there's like steel manufacturing and a lot of other companies that are very upset by.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the regulations that they've done that they haven't really touted in terms of deregulating some of the things. Because like the previous administration, a lot of good points, but some bad points. One of the bad points was this sort of the hamstringing of industry through over-regulation on everything, right? And so lifting some of that, there's this, you can argue whether, you want bigger government or less government, but you can't argue with the fact that it did unleash, industry and business more than the previous administration. So that's a good thing. But, look at all the other concerns. I mean, now we're talking about a global slowdown, right? Because, China's numbers are looking soft. Germany's looking soft. What does that mean? Everybody's worried about Brexit. So there's a lot of things for people to be focused on, and I worry sometimes that all we do here in the States is kind of like chase the next, shiny ball of tinfoil, because we're all a bunch of raccoons, right? We have such a short attention span for everything. And, anyway, what am I saying? I don't know. Sorry. Everybody's like, what? He was talking about attention span.
The last thing that I definitely wanted to talk to you about is one of the things that Trump brought up recently is the JFK case.
Oh, yeah.
And releasing some of the files, and they wanted to redact the information that pertained to the people that were still alive. Now, I want to know what I don't know what you could say, but what do you think about the JFK case? Do you think that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
I can see of all the sort of incidents, of all the I don't mean to minimize it by calling it an incident, but of all those situations, the Kennedy assassination and Martin Luther King's assassination, those are the two that I understand more than anything else why they've lingered, why people don't believe the shit that they've seen, and why they have concerns about it. Martin Luther King, more than Kennedy, I believe that there was something there that we still don't understand in terms of who else was responsible and who organized that and who assisted in that. Right? I just think of those two. That's the one I've got bigger questions on. The Kennedy assassination, I think that Oswald pulled the trigger. I think in his mind, the reason he was doing it was for the greater good of communism and to boost his image with the Soviets and with the Cuban regime. Do I think that he had assistance? I don't think so, but I could be swayed from that with better evidence than I've seen. But I understand why people are so dug in on it, right? Because, I mean, look, it was a massive event, right? It was a massive event. But Oswald had sufficient training. You did not have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. It was a different era, and we don't understand it in today's terms. But when you get right in that position and look out that window and look at the shot that was taken and, what was involved in that, was not you've shot, this sounds terrible, but, anybody who's hunted, has taken a more difficult shot than that.
Yeah.
So that part of it and his motivation and his past ties to the Soviets, do I think the Soviets were pulling the trigger on it? Do I think the Mafia were pulling the trigger? I haven't seen anything that convinces me that was the case. I think that Oswald felt like he was doing it for them, or he was going to prove himself in that regard. But again, I understand why people are dug in. The MLK one, Martin Luther King, I just, I think that, I don't think he acted alone.
What makes you think that?
I think that, look, he was a loser, a two-bit criminal, right, who was constantly getting picked up for the shit that he was doing and ending up in jail, right? He was a mess, right? There was nothing clever about him. And then leading up to the assassination, he cleaned up, right, his act. Suddenly he went from looking like a two-bit, criminal, to a college professor, basically. And he had cash. He was able to, purchase a vehicle. And he kind of went off the grid for a while. He went on this drive, right, and sort of stayed off the grid. And he behaved in a way that he hadn't up until, months before this thing took place. And then he ended up in Europe, and something tells me that he had assistance in some fashion. I don't know who, right, or whatever, but that's the one that more than any others that I've looked at, makes me step back and go, no, we don't know the whole story here. The Kennedy thing, again, maybe there's something out there that we just haven't turned over. It's always a possibility, but MLK, I think that's the one that's most disturbing.
That's interesting. I don't know enough about the MLK murder. I need to go look into that now, especially if you think that something's going on.
Look at his behavior.
What the hell was his name again? James Earl Ray.
James Earl Ray. And I've talked to his brother. I've interviewed his brother.
For what?
For a show, a series where we did a kind of investigative look into this. There's if all you do when you're looking at this is to look at Ray's behavior in that year leading up to the assassination, that's the interesting, for me, that's the most interesting part. I mean, put it in context with everything he did up until that point, which was basically, again, just a two-bit criminal. Couldn't stay out of jail. And then you get this. And you get this change in behavior and this change in appearance and this, sudden ability to, be something that he wasn't up until that point. I guess everybody can change, but that was the most striking part for me.
There's no obvious source of income?
No, just a penny ante criminal, basically. And there was plenty of information. It wasn't like he couldn't have gathered. If you say, well, no, he acted on his own. Well, okay, yeah. Was there information? Yes, leading right up to the day before. There was talk about, there were news reports showing King at the Lorraine Motel, and coming in and out of the room, that he was staying in. And so it wasn't as if you couldn't gather that information on your own, but it was that behavior leading up to it. And I'm not a conspiracy guy at all, right? I've seen too much shit to think that every conspiracy is holding water. So, but this one was disturbing in that regard, for what that's worth.
All right, I'm gonna look into it now.
Yeah, you should look into it, and we'll talk about it next time. See what you think, because I'd really be interested. I don't think we're gonna. This show that we're going to get ready to do here, start filming in next month, is not going to be looking into things like that.
What is it called?
It's going to be called Black Files. They may change the
right.
name just before we go on the air, but I really enjoyed the shows that they did in the past. America Declassified, with they're looking into conspiracies. I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was fascinating, and I get why people feel that way.
Yeah.
Kennedy, for sure.
Especially when they're on the outside. The Kennedy one, to me, the bullet is the most disturbing thing.
Yeah.
That bullet that just showed up on Connolly's gurney. Oh,
Yeah.
look what we found.
Yeah, we found this bullet, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not distorted and supposedly went through 2 people and shattered bone.
The magic bullet. The magic bullet, yeah.
It's just, I don't buy it. I don't think that bullet came from there.
That's probably the most, of all things, because we looked at the grassy knoll issue and the possibility of spotting the other
Look at
people
that
from the other
bullet.
side, yeah.
Get the fuck out of here with that bullet.
Yeah.
That bullet drives me crazy. Not only that, there's more pieces of the bullet fragments in Connolly's body. When you look at the X-rays of Connolly's body that show bullet fragments, there's little pieces. Yeah. They found little tiny pieces of metal in his body from the bullet fragments, but you don't see that missing from the bullet. It's bullshit.
Yeah, the bullet thing is again, there's elements of it that you look at, but collectively, and again, maybe there's something else out there. Maybe there is, and we just haven't uncovered it, or maybe this will, prompt, some additional information. Who knows? But, Anyway, it's fascinating shit. But I do get it because it was such a seminal moment, right? And nobody wants to think that something that bad, that horrific, and that's something that could sort of shatter the country in that fashion could be done by one guy like Lee Harvey Oswald
or John Hinckley.
Or John Hinckley. Yeah, exactly.
Didn't they just let him out?
Yeah.
What
not for good, right? Not for good. I think it was on a release program of some
sort.
sort.
Get the fuck out of here for life. Get the fuck out of here forever. Yeah. I don't care how well you've been behaving for 20 years while you've been locked up in a mental assignment. You shot the president. Get the fuck out of here. What is wrong with people?
Yeah, it's that old idea.
Oh, he's done his time.
He's done his time. Yeah, he's been
rehabilitated.
Rehabilitated, and that's always that argument: is prison for incarceration or is it for rehabilitation?
It's for us.
Yeah,
it's for us. You shot the president. Get in the cage.
Shit. Hey, can I say one thing before we finish up? This is sort of a bump for a buddy of mine who's in Boise. Just wrote his first book. If anybody's out there and they're looking for a book to read. His name is Andrew Cousins, and he's a former operator who, knows his shit. And it's his first attempt at a fiction novel. It's called A Failed State, and it's set in Afghanistan and also here in the U.S. and a couple other places, Turkey and Germany and elsewhere. Interesting read. A lot of technical information in there. It's a fiction novel, but he's dumped a lot of information in there, so it's clear he knows what he's talking about. But it's worth a peek if anybody's looking for something to read.
Look at you, looking out for a buddy.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Well, hey, brother, great to see you again. Thank you very much. Good luck with your show.
I appreciate that, man.
Come on again after it's over.
I'll do it. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, man.
That was great.
Doamna Popa ia de ani de zile vitamina C pentru imunitate. Mara și familia ei iau vitamina D în această perioadă a anului. Alex de la etajul 2 a auzit recent că zincul ajută la imunitate. Cu toții au dreptate. De aceea, pentru sistemul imunitar, eu iau Molechin Immuno. Molechin Immuno conține vitamina C, vitamina D și zinc. Molechin Immuno, de 3 ori protecție pentru imunitatea ta.
Acesta este un supliment alimentar. Citiți cu atenție prospectul.
4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, Barry.
Hi, Joe.
And now we're live. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It's very fortuitous. Your timing comes right in the middle of this big hubbub about this Native American elder and this young boy with one of those stupid fucking red hats on.
Yep.
Would you have ever imagined that a slogan like "Make America Great Again" would be so divisive? That somehow or another, like that would be like "Make America Great Again." It sounds like they just want to make things great, like all positive. No. And a red hat with white letters. Has there ever been a time like that where an object like a red hat with white letters was so repulsive to half the country?
Yes. Well, I mean, some people see it as the equivalent of a white hood.
Wow. I don't know about that.
They do. No.
I believe they do.
They
I
do. They
but I think
believe
they're
that
being
wearing
ridiculous.
that a 16-year-old wearing that hat
Mm-hmm.
sort of carries intense moral weight. That surely we know that a 16-year-old is not aware of all of the implications of wearing that hat.
Well, yeah, but the problem with that is Kanye wears it.
Right. Fair
So
enough.
It doesn't really work.
I agree. I'm just saying
Yeah.
there are people who really make that argument.
I get it. I know they
and people
do.
who are paid for their opinions.
Well, yeah. Well, there's also people that are calling for this child's name and address. They're calling to dox him and publicly expose him. This is a child. He's 16. Is that what he is?
He's 16 years old, and one of the things that was just so amazing about the whole brouhaha around it, I mean, it was in a way like this perfect encapsulation of our outrage culture, right? Because people saw a tiny clip of this video,
Yes.
and it was like a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
You saw in it this morality play of what it looked to be was a group of mostly white kids from Coventry Catholic School. I think it's in Kentucky. And it looked like, at first glance, that they were smirking and smug and had these sort of shit-eating grins on their faces, and that they were surrounding this older Native American man. And I have to tell you, I had a visceral reaction to it. The second I saw it, like so many other people,
I did
was
as well.
like, this is, where we are in our broken culture, and they're bullying this guy, and here's the rise of the... I had all of those reactions. The challenge of what it means to be a journalist is to not see people as signifiers or as stand-ins just based on their identity. And that's what 95% of the press corps did. They sort of leaped to assume that, our visceral reaction was accurate, when in fact, when you actually looked at the 2-hour video of the whole interaction, which also included this group of Black Israelites, or Hebrew Israelites they call themselves, it was not that at all. The Native American man had walked up to this group. The 4 other guys had been heckling the group beforehand, calling them crackers, calling them Satan, calling the one black kid in the group things that can't even be said. So it was just far more complicated. And what was really, really disheartening is that the initial outrage was enough for the mainstream press to report on it. Twitter has kind of become almost an assigning editor for places like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. And then when the actual truth of the thing comes out, when we move past the outrage cycle, they have to sort of write the follow-up story to the fake outrage to begin with.
Defending the fake outrage instead of backing up and saying, we made a mistake.
Right.
This
Some
kid-
people said that they made a mistake.
That's wonderful. That's a good sign.
Yes.
It really is.
But one of the things that was so horrifying was that people that are supposed to be adults, people with blue check marks on Twitter, were saying things like, this is the face of white patriarchy, this 16-year-old kid.
Or what Reza Aslan said.
Yeah, or
This
Reza
is-
Aslan said, have you ever seen a more
more?"
punchable
Yeah.
face? Kathy Griffin was saying, I need names, shame him, dox him. How do these people not understand the implications of that? So what happened over the weekend was that the, sleuthy detectives on Twitter found a kid who they thought was the kid in the video, wasn't actually the kid. So there's the actual kid who was doxxed, the family was harassed, everything that we now know happens in these outrage cycles. But then there was another kid who looked suspiciously like him, who was not him at all, whose family, there was an amazing and heartbreaking Twitter thread about it, whose family was in the middle of a family wedding. And they had to spend their whole weekend fighting off these mobs who were trying to destroy them. And it wasn't even the kid in the video. I mean, that is really horrifying to me, that that's where we are. And the fact that adults who should know better are fomenting this and don't see how thin, it sounds heavy, but the veneer of civilization is. They're taking a pickaxe to it. It's just, I just found the whole thing to be terrifying. I don't know how you felt.
I felt exactly the same way. And I think it's a very unique moment because it's so public and it's so prevalent in whether it's Twitter or Facebook, it's everywhere. And it sort of embodies everything that's wrong with a lack of nuance and with people taking one side versus the other and sticking with it, with not confronting their own personal biases. with looking at these things through the eyes of this is the enemy, I'm on the good side, they're on the bad side.
Yes.
Let's get them. And also this distorted idea of what it takes to be violent. Like this idea of this is a punchable person, like calling for violence. You're hearing a lot of this. Like this is one of the things that troubles me so much about the left. My parents were hippies. You know, I grew up when I was a little kid. We lived from the age of 7 to 11 in San Francisco during the Vietnam War. While the Vietnam War was ending, I was living in the middle of the hippie world. I always felt that people on the left were like these well-read, kind, compassionate people. But somewhere along the line, within the last few years, people on the left are calling for violence. This is very confusing to me. And it's this frivolous social media call for violence. It's not an in-person, be there, boots on the ground call for violence. It's a very strange call for violence. Punch Nazis. I'm hearing this all the time.
Because it's
right.
Because it's sorry, go ahead.
What I'm going to say is, what is a Nazi? Okay, so if you mean punch actual Nazis that are putting Jews into concentration camps, I'm with you. But when you call a guy with a MAGA hat on, he wears one of those red hats and he's just an asshole, he's a Nazi now? Some guy who maybe is not that educated, wants to be a contrarian, sees all these liberals that are complaining all the time, so he puts this red hat on and now he's a white supremacist and a Nazi and you want to punch him? Like, okay.
But that's what a lot of people in very high positions of power in this country, at least in the culture, actually believe. And they don't understand the implications of hollowing out words like that.
Yes.
I know this personally, right? Because I'm called alt-right, I'm called an apologist for rape culture, I've been called everything. I'm a centrist, okay? I'm a Jewish, center-left on most things, person who lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and, you know, is super socially liberal on pretty much any issue you want to choose. If I'm alt-right, what words do we have left for people that actually are that?
Exactly.
What words do we have left for people who actually are part of a sort of racist blood and soil nativism that's rising in this country and around the world that should terrify people that are using that language in the sloppiest of ways?
Yes.
I really don't think they're seeing the implications of it. I also think that when you're just, you know, you're keyboard warrior and you're just tossing this stuff out, so much of it is about signaling to your tribe that you know that this thing is bad.
Yes.
And I really don't think people are understanding the implications of this. And I don't think it's a stretch to imagine something like this happening a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months from now, and someone actually getting killed.
Right, like Charlottesville. I mean, very, very similar to what happened there. This kind of, I mean, when that guy drove over those protesters, the ramping up of the dialogue on both sides, the rhetoric, the violent talk, it's so disturbing and so unnecessary, especially when it's disingenuous, like calling someone like you alt-right. Or me. I get called alt-right adjacent. That's what I hear that
Me
one
too.
all the time.
Me too.
I go left on everything, basically except guns. There's a few things.
Right, and I'm like, repeal the
yeah.
Second Amendment.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
but
I do think that there should be some restrictions for gun use, just like I think there should be restrictions for car use. I actually think there should be testing for guns, and you should have to go. Look, you have to go through you have to take driver's ed to get a car license. How come you don't have to do any? You don't have to do anything to get a gun. Like if you're not a criminal, you just get a gun. Like, you don't have to know how to take care of it and clean it and safely handle it. You don't have to know the ethics of use. You don't have to know anything.
Oh, no, it's insane. I mean, and I just spent 6 weeks in Australia where they had basically one major massacre 20 years ago, and then I forget who it was. We could look it up. But, you know, Prime Minister, conservative, got rid of guns.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
They think we're insane and psychotic the way that we live.
Well, we're definitely weird.
The thing also, one other thing that jumped out to me about the Catholic school boy incident, it kind of signifies something broader that's happening, which is the erasure of the individual, which is just, I think, a horrifying problem in our culture. Like, what actually happened was a 1-hour incident on a random afternoon in January between a group of individuals, right? But instead in our
Why was everyone there? This is the
well,
March for Life?
the boys were there for the March for Life. I don't know why the Hebrew Israelites were there, but it's DC. Like, there are crazy protesters all the time, at the Lincoln Memorial and outside of the White House.
And the boys were there for a school event? Is that what it was?
They were there for the March for Life as part of their school, and they had had free time, I think, and then were kind of converging at the Lincoln Memorial.
And they didn't have a chaperone? There's no...
No, I think there was a teacher there, and they had asked the teacher at one point, in order to drown out the heckling of the Hebrew Israelites, I hope I'm getting the name of that group right, could we do a school cheer to kind of ignore them? And they did that, and I think they did that with permission from the teachers. At one point early on, it was rumored that they were chanting "Build the Wall," but no one has surfaced any evidence of that whatsoever.
Well, that's what I heard from the Native American elder when he was talking about it in the video. He said they were chanting out "Build that wall."
And maybe they were.
Wall.
I just haven't seen anything, and I've watched every video.
It's totally possible. They're also 16. Right?
Right,
And they're also
so
trying to make their friends laugh, and they're assholes, and they're just being silly and stupid.
Right, and I have to say, as someone who was a total nerd in high school, I saw the face of the main kid in that still photograph and that video, and the 14 and 15-year-old girl in me was enraged.
Yeah.
Really, I was I see the face of so many kids who said the nastiest things to me and who threw friends of mine into garbage cans, disgusting bullying.
Was it because
But the thing is, you have to get to the next step if you're a jerk. No, it was, yeah. Oh, for sure.
But if he's just standing there,
it's the hat.
and he doesn't have the
face. Hat on. Maybe even still if it's a group.
But
my thing is your initial reaction to something is not the truth.
Right.
It's your emotional reaction. And anyone who calls themselves a journalist, your job is to figure out the facts of the case, not to make this into a kind of identitarian morality play. And the fact that so many people in so many publications did just that, and in fact, when the real facts surfaced, just sort of dug their heels in and were basically well, he's a stand-in for the white patriarchy. What? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There was an actual BuzzFeed writer that said it's the look of white patriarchy, his face. You're really going to put that on a 16-year-old? Would we do, it's just, that's nuts to me.
Well, it's cruel. It's a denial of the individual. It's very cruel. When you're 16 years old, you're basically a baby. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're incredibly susceptible to the influence of your peers. You're around a bunch of other boys. You're not around girls because you don't go to school with girls because you go to some wacky religious school, right? This is, you want to really be a social justice warrior? You really want to save the world? How about you do something about the Catholic Church? Everybody wants to go after R. Kelly, which is great, but how about the Catholic Church? How about the #1 kid-fucking organization of all time?
Yes.
That's what it is, and I was raised Catholic. I know what it is.
Did anything happen to you?
Nothing happened to me. I got lucky. But I know people. I know a bunch of people. I know a bunch of people with stories. And this is all over the world.
Oh, yeah. But
these kids come from that cult. Imagine if that was not the Catholic Church, if it was instead Scientology. We would be going, oh, these kids are a part of a cult. They went there. They're a part of this weird cult that suppresses sexuality amongst its priests and encourages the placement of these pedophile priests in new places in order to get away from whatever crime they've committed in the area where they were initially established. This is what the Catholic Church is, right? And they travel all over the place. But it also is good people. This is where nuance comes into play. It's good people. There's a bunch of people that are Catholics because they want a better relationship with God or the universe or love or whatever. They feel like it's a good moral framework for their children. They take them there. They believe in the 10 Commandments. They believe in this moral structure for society that's laid down by what they believe is God. There's great people that are involved in the Catholic Church, but it's also the #1 kid-fucking organization in the world. It's those two things, right? So these kids are a part of something that's way worse than smirking at a Native American with a drum. And in my opinion, I remember when I was 16, I was a fool. I was a dumb person.
Were you a bully?
No, I was bullied.
Yeah.
I was little.
Because you were small,
I was small, and I learned martial arts when I was 15. I mean, I'm sure I was a dick to some people just because I could get away with it. I don't really remember it. But
Most
I definitely,
15-year-old boys and girls are in different ways.
People are dicks. You're trying it out. You know, you don't even know how to talk yet. You're basically just learning words. And this kid, with this guy beating the drum inches from his face, he handled it, I believe, way better than I would. I don't think I would have.
You have business with
No,
me?
you
I don't
might have
know
walked
if-
away. I mean,
I don't think so.
really?
No, I don't think so. Not when I was 16. Problem when I was 16, also I was competing. I was doing a lot of martial arts events, so maybe I would have kept it together better than I'm thinking I would have. But I definitely was a fucking idiot, and I was 16. You know, you just
Right.
don't. And who knows what's going on that day? Who knows? Like if you have
course.
anxiety about the future, or your girlfriend broke up with you, or you failed the test, or what else that is like bouncing around inside your head, overwhelming your ability to form reasonable thoughts.
Totally.
16.
But let's assume, by the way, that not everyone's, every liberal I know, okay, everyone on the center and center left, and even the center right's reaction to it was accurate. That he was a little asshole,
Right.
that he's a racist, homophobic, transphobic, hates immigrants, and every single thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that deserve to be news? That
No.
a 16-year-old kid with those views smirked at a Native American elder?
Especially considering
I'm
what
not-
he actually did. No.
I don't think that's news.
Not only that.
I think it's strange that we're covering it like it is, and because of the internet, the fact that my timeline on Twitter and on Facebook and on everything, this was way bigger news than day whatever it is, 3031 of the government shutdown, where people are having to get on bread lines to feed their families.
Right.
I mean,
but
come
here's
on.
the thing: is it like, but it's what people want to talk about. I think there's this idea that there's things that are happening right now, like the government shutdown, and then there's things that are happening right now in terms of our culture shifting, and when these things that come up in opposition to what many people believe is a beneficial shift to a more progressive, more responsible culture, when these little hiccups, they get addressed, and they get addressed rapidly. And I think it's because people are aware that things are changing in this almost like unprecedented way. If you look back
Yeah,
at,
unprecedented pace. I agree with that.
yeah, like nothing we've ever there's nothing that you could find in the historical record for human beings has ever been what we've experienced over just the past 10 plus years of social networks and social media, and the ability to spread information very quickly with a YouTube video or a tweet or whatever. Or, I mean, these
Right.
the way people are exchanging information is just very different, and because of that, culture is shifting at a hyperspace speed. It's just turbocharged for sure. So I think when something comes up that we think is like, there's one, get it,
Exactly.
but it's not logical. It's like road rage. You know why you get road rage? One of the reasons, because you're going fast. Okay, you're in a car and you're nervous. Your heightened senses, so anything that happens, it gets magnified. Like someone's, you this motherfucker in my lane.
Yes.
Fuck you, honk honk, because you're already jacked up to 8 because you're in a car going 60 miles an hour.
Wait, Twitter does that emotionally
Twitter's
for us.
doing that.
100%.
And social media is doing that. Life is doing that. So when something like this comes up, this rapid pace of change, which is almost impossible to keep up with, right? With the news cycle and this constant wave of change and information. So when something comes up, people are road raging on this kid.
Totally. That's why we just have to, I mean, there's lots of things to say, but one thing is just continue to insist on truth and facts.
Yes.
And not allowing people to be stand-ins for a group. You're not a stand-in for anyone. You're yourself. You answer for yourself. And I find that trend on both sides really, really scary.
It's because people are insecure. And, you know, I think for someone like Kathy Griffin, who's experienced that public shaming.
She's right. That amazes me, right? Like she's been publicly shamed herself in the most horrific way, has basically had to live underground. And now she's saying, shame him, name him, and dox him?
I think
don't
it
understand
reinforces people's idea that they should be more committed to their side, more committed to their team. The only way you're going to get any support if you have been attacked and isolated and out alone is to get back deep into the team again. Like, how do you get back deep into the team again? You got to be fucking rabid, you know, and that's part of it. It's a natural reaction that people have to sort of signal to everyone else on the team they're all in. They're fully committed. They don't even care about their fucking career. I'm an activist. Like, that kind of shit happens, and it's people that want love. That's what a lot of it is.
Yeah.
It's they do recognize that there's something wrong. They are reacting to a real thing. I'm not denying that. But I am saying that the reason, the overwhelming reason, the motivation for this kind of overzealous reaction is often a signaling thing. And so they want to let everybody know.
Totally.
I'm on the fucking team, man. I'm all in. Let's go punch some Nazis. And the people that I've talked to people that have said that in real life. And I'm like, man, you can't punch anybody. You shouldn't punch anybody. They're going to punch you back. Don't punch. First of all,
or save your punch for
a real one.
Yeah,
a real one.
You know, in Poland or
Yes.
in Hungary right now.
Right.
You know, not a 16-year-old kid who maybe has no idea what that hat signifies.
Well,
there's a broader point, which is like the very same people. Like, one of the sort of wisdoms of criminal justice reform, right, is, which I believe in, is that we shouldn't try kids as adults, and we should have greater generosity and mercy and forgiveness for the crimes of a child, even if they've committed them.
Yes.
Those same people are the ones saying dox him and shame him, generally, politically.
Well, you're seeing that now. And this is, again, there's never been a doxing before. There was no doxing, right? How long has doxing been around? A decade?
Well, like, since Gamergate is when it got huge, right?
Yeah, maybe let's go crazy and say the first doxing was 20 years ago. That's a blip, right? That's so recent. So, you know, this is not a thing that people have really had to balance out in their mind, when to do it and when not to do it. They just do it.
I think people have no idea of what that looks like.
Right.
And unless you've experienced it or watched someone you know experience it, it's like an abstraction. Because these people are abstractions. They're two-dimensional
Yes.
little puppets.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And this extreme lack of empathy, the lack of empathy towards anyone who doesn't share your position. This is very strange. It's piss poor thinking, and it's everywhere.
And everyone wants to feel like not being a part of one of the tribes is an extremely lonely position, and you get called all the bad names because people want you to be a part of their tribe. And people don't want to be called bad names, and they want to feel like they're in an in-group. Like,
100%.
Emotionally, I totally get that.
Yeah,
Because it
100%.
kind of sucks being homeless.
Well, it's just...
Politically homeless.
Yes. It's just... When you got a president that's so polarizing, and you have an opposition to him that's so... There's so much momentum in opposing him. And I think this is a giant wedge in between these two sides. And then you have that hat. And that hat, if that kid wasn't wearing that hat, I guarantee it'd be like 20% less hate. It would be...
Oh, yeah.
It would be... People would still get mad at him because he was standing... Like, I've seen people say when a native elder walks up to you and he's banging his drums, get the fuck out of the way. I saw that. Like, come on. You can't expect that. You can't just beat your drum. First of all, he got right in the kid's face, like inches from the kid's face. Pretty amazing, the restraint this kid had to just smile. And the idea that you're going to judge this kid, millions and millions and millions of people are going over this right now. That kid woke up that morning, he had no fucking idea. He was a kid in a cult, okay? He's in a Catholic cult school, and he's going to some weird thing, some March for Life where people are trying to kill babies. We got to stop them from killing babies, right? And he goes there, and there's black Israelites calling them the faggots, and there's all these people calling him names, and then all of a sudden this guy's beating a drum in front of his face, and we're supposed to dox this kid now because he smirked.
Yeah.
That's a crazy, an impossible lack of empathy. It's impossible to defend. Like, unless you hate boys. Unless you hate all boys, because boys are dumb. Like 16-year-old boys are almost universally dumb. They all grow up to be men. Some of those men will be your best friend. Some of those men will be amazing. Some of those men you'd be so happy to see. When you see him, you give him a big hug. Okay, that's me.
Right.
That's me. I was a stupid fucking 16-year-old.
Right.
And I'm a man now, and I try to be as nice as I can to everybody. I go way out of my way to be a kind person. That could be that kid too. Like, what you're doing is not good for anybody. It's not good for society to take this trend and run with it. And this is what people do now. You know, you dock 16-year-olds.
And it turbocharges the right. Like, that's
Yes.
what I think people are not quite understanding, that dynamic. That
Yes.
if you're someone who, you know, is frustrated with Trump and is maybe moving to the middle, and, you know, imagine that person. It's easy to imagine.
Yeah.
Then you see this and you're like, I don't want those people being in charge of me. I don't want those people running the government.
Yes.
I mean, that's the, like, visceral reaction. I don't think they're understanding the, like, implications of what they're doing.
I don't think they understand.
Maybe they do.
No, there's no mastermind behind this. There's
No,
no
I don't mean a
understanding.
mastermind,
Right,
but,
I don't
like-
think they do understand their implications. When you have a spectrum, right, the far right and the far left, they have a very similar reaction as they drive a person to the other side. The person that sees the far right and sees repulsive racism and bigotry, that, you know, build that wall, fuck these Mexicans, fuck those little kids, they should have known better, they're all illegals. That kind of person, that pushes people towards progressivism. It pushes people towards much more liberal, even socialist ideologies. Like, fuck that grossness. And the same thing could be said for someone like, I'm going to send you something, Jamie. This is a real poster that Antifa is sending. They were putting on walls and fence posts and shit in the Pacific Northwest. And it's actually kind of hilarious because it's so stupid.
How do I see it?
I'm gonna send it to Jamie, and
cool.
Jamie's gonna put it up on the screen here. But it says, oops, wrong Jamie. Sorry, Jamie Kilstein. Here you go, buddy. I just sent it. It says, when you date a white, it's not all right. And it's like,
Oh my God.
it's telling people to not date white people.
Propagation of whites is propagation of hatred, oppression,
Yes.
homophobia, sexism, transphobia, racism, and ableism.
Now, if I was
So are we supposed to
Yes.
sterilize white people?
there it is. We can see it up on the big screen, so it's even
Cool,
grosser.
that's
because it's large.
awesome.
But see,
Jesus.
this is the thing. Racism is terrible, right? So how do you stop racism? Well, racism can only be perpetrated by white people. Oh, well, the problem is white people. We got to stop white people. Well, now you're racist. Like, you're literally being racist to stop.
Is this really everywhere? I've never seen this.
Well, people are finding it and posting it online.
Oh my God.
And someone sent it to me. I don't know if it's everywhere. It's probably just one asshole, right?
Do you see
but the person exists, right? That person exists, and they think they're a progressive.
Do you see the cold civil war that we're in this country becoming a
Yes.
hot one?
No, I hope not. That's why I worry
Like, where
about this
does
punch
this go?
stuff.
Where does this go?
No one knows. If we did, we could make a lot of money in the stock market. this is why I'm concerned, especially because I understand violence a lot better than most people do. You can't just say, go punch people. When Reza Aslan says, have you seen a more punchable face? That is so fucking dangerous because you're almost saying, go punch this kid. I saw someone else, I accidentally favored something. I didn't mean
I
to
hope you
favor it.
unfavored it.
I did. Someone pointed to me, and I'm just lucky that I looked at it because I normally don't even read comments, but somebody pointed out that I favored a really preposterous tweet that said, it said, the reply from the school was pathetic and impotent. Name these kids. Oh, that's Kathy Griffin. Here's the one that said, this guy said, God damn it. I can't find it. He was basically saying no need to... Here it is. A face like that never changes. This image will define his life.
Oh,
no one need ever forgive him. And this is the person with the blue check mark by their name. No one need ever forgive him. A face like that defines his life. That is virtual signaling in the most toxic form. It's so dangerous
also
to
like-
think like that.
The idea that... I'm sorry, I was trying to...
No, it's okay.
The idea that people cannot change
crazy.
and are irredeemable
Right.
is crazy.
Cancel culture. I was talking about this with Kanye. Honestly, we were talking about cancel culture.
When was he on the show?
We were talking about it in person.
Oh, okay.
On the phone.
Okay,
He's got to
cool.
be on the show.
Okay, cool.
Allegedly. He's a little nervous about
I'd
it.
like to see him with the samurai sword posing in front of
I think he would go with the
American
Elon
flag.
Musk gun.
Yeah, you're
I
probably
looked
right.
up that poster. It was first posted over 2 years ago, and it supposedly is like a troll.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, good,
but this
good,
is
good.
the world where it's hard to find what's a troll and what's not. What I was going to say that if I was cynical, I would say that if I was a person who's like far right,
Exactly,
I would
you'd
put
that up, of course.
just to fuck with these people and to sweep people. I mean, it's basically like some CIA psyops type shit. You know, I mean, this is, but we're so through the looking glass here that like that post that I just read you, that's a real post about this guy is unredeemable. No one need ever forgive him. That's just as bad, in my opinion, as that poster saying don't date white people. It's all crazy.
You're depressing me.
No, don't be depressed.
No.
But
I'm
here's
just
the
like,
thing.
you have to like fight. I have to fight this feeling of despair. You have to, like, I find myself fighting it because the basic, like some like basic virtues, right?
Yes.
That used to be normal, right? Like civility, right? Civility has now become, for some people, a code word for like complicity with Nazism. Like if you're civil and you believe in civility and you believe in, you know, treating people decently and with giving them the benefit of the doubt, like that word itself has become a code or a signal in a negative way. Empathy, like doubt, even saying it, I don't know. You know, I just, these basic virtues seem to have been like swept away. And I don't know when they got lost.
Well, a key ingredient for sure, the thing that hardened the epoxy was Trump. I think these trends are going in that direction anyway, but he capitalized on that. You know, he's a very smart manipulator. I mean, he knew how to capitalize on that. I mean, this chant of build that wall, it's not an accident. That's something that he concentrates on. And it's not just that it's they're in a political battle right now, because if they get him to back down off the wall, then, you know, he looks like a loser when 2020 comes around. He looks less powerful to all his people. There's that for sure, but there's also this. He's so egregious, like everything. He's so that guy.
Well, he's gotten rid of all the guardrails.
Yeah,
like he's broken the dam. My question, like thinking about how we're going to get beyond this, is how do we build it back? Because he's broken something, or he's signifying the fact that it was broken, one or the other. I think that he was both a symptom of something that was broken that we didn't recognize, and now he's further catalyzed that brokenness.
Well, I think both sides have to recognize that the other side has some points. That's one thing. And then I think we also have to treat ourselves like we're all a family and we're all on a big team, because that's what we really are. If we really are the United States of America, I mean, what is a country? I mean, if anything, we're supposed to be a team. The idea that we're separated and we're two teams in this one team, the real differences in terms of like who gets elected, like how it's going to affect your life, involve business, involve some social policies, involve some things, but the way we interact with each other on a day-to-day doesn't involve that at all. That has to be fixed first. The way we think about each other on a day-to-day basis. There used to be a time where you could have a conservative friend, and you could be a liberal, and you could be a fucking long-haired hippie guy, and as long as you were a good, hard-working person who didn't let their lawn go crazy, your next-door neighbor, who was like a Goldwater Republican, would talk to you.
Totally.
And you would go, how's it going, Mike? What's going on with the, oh, you know, guys at the force are trying to put together this case and this and that, and, you know, a professor could live right next to a cop, and they would be friends, and one would be conservative and one would be liberal, and they would make fun of each other a little bit and rib each other a little bit. And that would be the end of it. That would be it. It wouldn't be this civil war that we're experiencing right now. Right now, just verbal, and hopefully it stays that way. But it's confusing. It's confusing because there's a frustrating lack of empathy that when I look at human beings and when I look at people that aren't seeing what everyone else is seeing, or they're not seeing things objectively and they're irrational and overly emotional, I always assume there's something else they're running from. I always assume. When I see someone lashing out and insulting everyone around them, I always assume it's not the people around them. It's something internal. There's something, maybe some existential angst they're fighting against, some realization of the futility of life, whatever the fuck it is. I mean,
Totally.
We're finite organisms.
Yes.
Playing this game as if it lasts forever. And accumulating stuff as if it's going somewhere with you, like it's going to get in that wooden canoe and the god Ra is going to take it with you in the afterlife. It's nonsense. And somehow or another we know this, and especially as people get older, they seem to push it further and further in the back of their mind, and they get more and more ideologically based. They're less open-minded. They're less open to nuance. It's very rare to see a 65-year-old guy switch parties.
Yeah, that's right. You become calcified.
you become that guy. You know,
The uncle.
Yeah, that fucking asshole uncle that has a couple of drinks in him and starts talking about the gays, you know, and this and that, and all the things that are wrong with our culture, the sodomites. You know, people start talking crazy.
I've never heard that at a Thanksgiving dinner. Thank God.
I haven't either. Thank God. But I think there's a few things that could help us. One, I think, is just time. Realizing that these stupid fucking blow-ups over this kid and the discussion that comes afterwards, hopefully some of this will settle down. We're allowed to have disagreements. We're allowed to have opinions about how these kids should have behaved. We're allowed to have
Stay
ideas
focused.
in our minds about how you would behave
Stay
if you were
focused.
that kid. But I don't think you're allowed to dox him. I don't think you're allowed to even say that. I don't think you're allowed to say that you want to punch him. I think that's a
That
fool.
needs to become socially unacceptable
Yes.
to do that.
Yeah, you need to be checked for that, because that's you know when someone says things like Reza Aslan, who's punched him? Anybody punch you, buddy? Who's ever punched you? You know
No
what being
idea.
punched feels like?
Sam
you know what
Harris?
it's like when you
Would he have punched
you
Reza
would-
Aslan?
He might. Jordan would probably punch him. Jordan's more of a I'll punch you type of a guy. I don't think Sam would ever say he would punch somebody.
I cannot. I have to say, I cannot imagine ever saying to someone, "I will punch you."
Well, you know,
I felt the feeling of "I'm going to punch you," but I can never imagine typing
it's
that.
yeah. I mean, unless you're protecting someone you care about or your own self.
Although I did see this amazing video of Buzz Aldrin. Did you see this?
Oh, punching the guy who said he didn't go to... I know that guy. That guy, Bart Seabrough, that he punched. I went to
You
dinner
know
with
a
that
moon
guy.
landing denier?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
used
I
to
know
be
you know
one.
Alex Jones.
I used to be a moon landing denier. I used to believe totally that we never went to the moon. Because there was a documentary that came on
no.
Fox. Yes, trust me.
No,
Fox,
I didn't Google you hard enough before I came on here.
In the 1990s, Fox had a show called Conspiracy Theory, Did We Go to the Moon? And they aired it on television, prime time. And they got me hook, line, and sinker. And for years, I
my
believed that we didn't go to the moon.
What changed you?
Mostly talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson, but also critical thinking. Also realizing that I was fully committed to that idea without really exploring the possibility whether that idea was incorrect. And that I had taken everything that I saw in that documentary, which is incredibly convincing, and with 100% confirmation bias, I only looked at that and I didn't look at all the contrary evidence. There's some fucked up stuff about the moon landing, unfortunately. And the fucked up stuff is mostly people that were involved in publicity that were doing stupid things with photographs. Like they had taken a picture of...
You're gonna. I'm going into uncharted territory here,
Yeah.
just so you know. Like you're an expert on this.
Yes.
I've never gone into moon landing denialism, so
Yeah.
I don't know about it.
was Buzz Aldrin... who was the guy that was Michael Collins? Michael Collins in Gemini 15. There was
Jamie's like, I've
there was
heard
a photograph.
this before.
He's seen it many times. Pull out that photo. This is
God.
what I'm
With
talking
the
about.
shadow?
No. It has nothing to do with that. This is a photo that they put out as an official photograph of Michael Collins doing a spacewalk. But what it actually is a photo of them testing equipment, and they blacked out the background. So he's in this suit that they were doing with testing. And instead, because they really couldn't get good photos in space because no one's out there with him taking these pictures, right? So they lied. They faked it. This is it. So you see the one on the left, you see the real photograph. And this is him in a studio where they're working on him, or warehouse rather, or some sort of a testing
Okay.
environment, working on how to control these harnesses that you would use when you were on a spacewalk.
Okay.
Because that thing, propels him forward and back, and he's learning how to use it. What they did was they just blacked out the background and reversed it, and then they sold that as him actually being in space. So this is probably an
Okay.
overzealous publicist. And there's a bunch of these. There's a bunch of these when it comes to different backgrounds in areas of the moon that are many, many miles apart from each other. It shouldn't be the same background. And more likely than not, what you're dealing with is overzealous publicists, because photographs were incredibly difficult to get, I'm sure.
Well, the moral of this story to me, thank God, first of all, that you're no longer a moon landing denier, but also the power of the media and the press. And like you saw one documentary, right?
It was a couple after I saw that.
And
I saw
that-
quite a few.
But that sent you down this rabbit hole. And
Yeah.
that, I've been thinking about, did you see that Roku is, I think, deplatformed InfoWars?
Yes, instantly, like within a day. But I wanted to ask you
I
a
have
question
to say,
before we get to that.
Okay, because I have to say, I think I support that because I don't want, like, in an age in which people don't know, okay? Like a 15-year-old clicking through their Roku doesn't necessarily know the difference between CNN and InfoWars and the New York Times and MSNBC and whatever. And of course, some of those other ones have biases, obviously. But InfoWars promotes conspiracy theories. And do I want a 15-year-old kid stumbling into that and thinking that that information is on par or on a level with actual facts?
The problem with conspiracy theories is that some of them are real. This is the real problem. The problem is you don't know which ones are real, but some of them are real. The Gulf of Tonkin that got us into the Vietnam War. Are you aware of that?
Okay, but Sandy Hook.
Well, okay, Sandy Hook for sure happened. A bunch of kids died, and these are horrible. These are horrible, evil conspiracies. The problem is
Promoted by
right.
Alex Jones.
Yes, it's horrible, without a doubt. And and I saw the Media Matters clip that I'd never seen before. I saw it recently.
Which clip?
The one that shows every time he brought it up.
Oh.
I mean, it's not just one time.
Oh, I know. He's
many
obsessed with it.
times, and was saying it was an absolutely fake thing.
Has he ever apologized?
He's
for this?
backed off of the position now, but I think
Because of the lawsuit, or?
I'm sure it's a lot of things. I'm sure it's the pressure. It has to be a realization that he knows that it really did happen. But there's a giant group of people out there that still believe it didn't happen, and they still confront these parents, even in court, and they call them crisis actors.
No, I know. The Times has done amazing reporting on this. Elizabeth Williamson, my old colleague.
It's sick. It's sick. It's twisted.
We probably shouldn't. I mean, we can go
No,
into
it's not
conspiracy
a bad
theories. I
thing
just don't know.
to go into. It's not a bad thing to go into because it's a thing.
Okay.
But it's
But
it's
I'm curious what you think,
dangerous
though.
ground.
What do you think of Roku taking InfoWars off?
I think we have to decide what is Twitter, what is Facebook,
Yeah.
what is YouTube. The position that most people have is these are private companies, they can make their own rules. This is just like CBS deciding that if you use, if you drunkenly yell the N-word out at a black police officer, that they don't want you as a newscaster anymore.
Yeah.
That's a public or a private company that can make these distinctions. If you take a position, an anti-Semitic position, publicly, they can decide, look, we don't want you on the air anymore. And then there's other people that think freedom of speech in this form is so important, and that the answer to bad ideas is not stopping those ideas, it's good ideas. It's good ideas confronting those ideas, and you see it all work itself out. That's the other side of the coin. That's the other side of the argument. The argument that we should treat, whether it's Twitter or YouTube or any of these social media platforms, as a public utility, and that you should be able to distribute information. The real problem is with all of this is that it's very messy. This is a nuanced issue. There's a lot going on, because when you do decide to deplatform someone for having an awful position and spreading a false conspiracy about that, most people are going to agree with you. But the question is, does it stop there?
Exactly.
And does it move on to you are a person who believes in white nationalism? What does that mean? Well, I believe that black pride is fine, but I also believe white pride is fine. What about those people? Where do we go with them?
Right.
Then it gets slippery.
What about the alt-right adjacent people?
Yeah, alt-right adjacent.
I totally get
What about
it.
people that have given the alt-right a platform? What are they a part of the problem now? Should we deplatform them? I mean, this is one of the things that there was a paper that someone had put together, an article. It was
This data and society
yes,
thing?
Hilarious. Where it's like
Yeah.
everyone has this very bizarre connection.
It's
And-
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Yes,
basically.
exactly. And but they're using it in terms of
Like-
the way the connections is almost if it's scientific data.
Well, they would basically say of you, or of someone, like...
Well, they did say
you're-
of me.
They said of you, you're a
Yes.
gateway to the alt-right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I said is Barbara
Your
Walters
action
interviewed Castro. Does that make her a
inspires us all.
communist?
Right,
What
exactly.
the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly.
I'm pretty left. Like, just ask me questions. Like, if
Ilios
you
will
want to
win
know,
this
I'm not going to
conflict.
hide my positions on things from you. I'm very open. Obviously, I told people I used to believe the moon landing is fake. I'll tell you all the stupid shit I believed. But the question with this is, why do people want that? Because it's simple and easy. Just get rid of them, punch the Nazis. It's lazy, stupid people thinking, and they're thinking publicly, and they represent a progressive viewpoint with their lazy, stupid thinking. It's not that progressivism and that progressive viewpoints are bad. It's that lazy, stupid thinking in applying a progressive viewpoint is bad. It's not even that socialism is bad. I've been thinking a lot about socialism lately in terms of like, what is the point? If we get to a certain point and then our heart stops beating and we die, and you left behind $18 billion to your kids because you were the ultimate capitalist and you went hog wild, that's a fool's path. That is a nonsense path. Like, why did you do that? Like, why didn't you try to use that money, this insane amount of wealth, and have this massive impact on the populace? Why didn't you try to figure out some way?
Well, it would be your choice to.
Right, it wouldn't be your choice to. But what if?
And it can be your choice to be Bill Gates right now.
But what if this Bill Gates is doing that in a lot of ways with some of the money? Got a lot of fucking money. You know, if he throws $1 million here or there, it really ain't shit for him. He's got like $90 billion, whatever it is. But the point is that things like the fire department, we agree. This is a socialist thing, right? We're all chip in.
We have public utilities.
Yes, we have public utilities. We have, people that Parks and Recreation, people that Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the sheriffs that patrol our national forests. Like, we all chip in to pay for these things. We all agree these are important things.
Well, one of the things that was so interesting about Australia is that in certain ways it's a more, it's thought of as sort of a macho culture, maybe more masculine, a little bit more conservative than here generally. And yet the left has won there on so many of the major issues that we're killing each other over now.
They're very good
Universal
people.
health care.
Yeah.
Mandatory 401k. It's like a $18 minimum wage. Pensions. 4 weeks of vacation a year. Like,
I think they get maternity leave as well.
Oh, yeah. It's just like so many of the things that here are up for grabs, they already solved.
I think we have to take two things into consideration. One, that they have a small population.
Small and homogenous.
Yes, and it's an enormous place. You're dealing with a place as large as the contiguous United States of America, but there's only 20 million people.
Oh, I'm aware, because when they were like, it's crowded in that restaurant, and I was like, you mean I don't have to wait for an hour to get in? Like, they had they've never seen a crowd of people.
Yeah, they don't know what a real crowd is. And also, I think their culture is less constrained by history, because they were essentially prisoners. I mean, it's like several generations
the non-indigenous,
removed.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's not only that they're not indigenous.
No, I mean like the non-indigenous population were prisoners.
Yes. Well, they were sent there because England didn't want them. And that's literally how the country got founded.
Oh, yeah, for like stealing a watch.
Yeah.
Like they were low-level crimes.
Well, then they sent them to the much better place.
Oh, yeah.
Way better.
It's
Go to
amazing.
the Gold Coast, you're like, holy
it's
shit.
stunning. It just takes forever to get there.
If you were in Manchester and it's raining every day, and you're like, fuck this place, and you stole a watch and they shipped you off to the Gold Coast, you're like, what? What just happened? This is hilarious.
Totally.
You can fish out here. It's fucking beautiful. They're nice people. And I wonder if they're so nice. I feel like they are slightly less nice than Canadians, who are way more nice than us.
I think that's right. I also think that they have it so good that they're a little complacent, and that makes me concerned because China.
Okay, right.
That's like the big story there.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, that is to be considered, but I think the United States, first of all, we have this momentum of innovation and of ass kicking and getting things done and creating things that's so different than any other part of the world. If we took that shit down a notch, I think we'd be okay. I mean, I think we definitely do have to worry about China, and I've been really trying to closely follow all this Huawei stuff, where these executives keep getting arrested, and it's the close relationship between some tech companies and this communist government is very confusing. But some people look at if you talk to people that are Chinese natives or who have been to China, they almost look at it as a positive. There's less resistance. It's more, even though the censorship is open, it's at least you know what you're dealing with over there, as opposed to the NSA is spying on us but pretending. I don't buy it at all.
Yeah,
but
I've seen some people make that argument. It's horrifying
to
me.
It's weird.
It's horrifying.
Yeah. So I agree with you. You do have to worry about China, but I think Australia's like, it's fucking Americans to take care of it. That's how they think.
Sort of,
Yeah.
except like their situation is that they're enormously dependent on China economically, and they love having that money, but they seem to be a little bit like sleepwalking through history and not, at least some people that I spoke to. But that's the real story in Australia is China.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're not a military might, you know, you're not like one of the big players. You're kind of like sitting back watching. Because what are we going to do? Like, what if Australia decides to ramp up its defense budget by, 5,000% over the next 10 years and develop a crazy arsenal of weapons and super soldiers and shoot them all up with steroids and give them exoskeletons and get ready to go to war, start building bunkers,
Right.
and freak the rest of the world out? I mean, and take this like North Korea with money approach to the world. I mean,
What do you mean North Korea with money?
Well, North Korea is basically like this scary spot that nobody wants to invade, even though we know that there's a military dictatorship there. They have
because they have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they have nuclear weapons. They have a madman who's in control. They have people that escape with horrific stories.
And we have a president
Yeah.
who talks about them as if they're sort of a normal country.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is, like, he might be able to sit down with them and actually talk to them. His unconventional approach might actually lead to some sort of communication, at least, which is better than nothing, I guess. But if I don't mean like in North Korea, like they take over the country and imprison its people. I mean like they become kind of dangerous and sketchy and small. Like North Korea is not a military power like in terms of like the way the Soviet Union is, where they could take over the world. But they're scary.
No, but they're untouchable,
Yeah,
and that's scary.
Exactly. If Australia became that, then I think we'd have a totally different attitude about Australia.
Yeah, no, Australia, we don't need,
Yeah, Australia's just laid back and they're like, Americans will take care of it. And then we're over here building fucking walls and shooting missiles. Yeah, I would imagine it would be really weird to watch us from afar. You know, if you were paying attention to world politics.
They know everything. I mean, everyone I talked to there was like, let's talk about gerrymandering in Virginia. And I'm like, what? Like, what? What are you saying?
It's kinda like
they
you have to pay
obsessively
attention.
follow what's going on here in a way that I found kind of amazing. Like, genuinely, actually gerrymandering in Virginia. I was like, what?
I would move over there.
Don't you have news going on over here?
A lot,
But the answer is sort of no, yeah.
Comedians move over there. They move over there and become huge in Australia. Shout out to my friend Arj Barker. He's out there. He's huge, gigantic over there. Like a lot of people don't know him here in Australia. He's like Jerry Seinfeld. Huge, enormous.
Right.
Sells out huge auditoriums.
But that's because when a giant American celebrity comes over, they're just going to sell out everything. Because that's the
No.
only game in town, no?
He's not a giant American celebrity. He's an Australian celebrity.
Jerry Seinfeld?
No, Arj Barker.
I thought we were talking about Jerry Seinfeld.
No,
I'm like,
Jerry Seinfeld's all over the
Joe,
world.
I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
I know you're
No.
into like alternative media platforms,
No,
but I
no,
think
no,
people
no.
know who Seinfeld is.
No, Arj Barker.
I've never heard of him.
There you go.
So there you go. He's
If
huge
you
in
were-
Australia.
When I talk to Australians and they're like, "Oh, you're a stand-up comedian, you know Arj Barker," they're gonna be mad at me. Like Adam Greentree's gonna be pissed right. That fucking Australian accent's terrible, bro.
It is bad.
It's not good.
I don't even try.
But
Have you been following the Women's March stuff at all or no?
yes, I have. Yeah, the anti-Semitic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fucking groups. You know, when you have a group, you have a group of people, and then you have.
But that was a little bit to me related to what happened at the Lincoln Memorial, right? Where you had these, the leadership of the Women's March, which looked like a Shepard Fairey poster come to life. Like they were just perfect. You had the Linda Sarsour in her hijab.
Explain
you had
to people
Tamika
what's going
Mallory.
on.
Well, what's going on is that back in August 2017, I wrote a column called When Progressives Embrace Hate. And it was saying, I was super moved by the Women's March, as so many other women I know were. But let's look at some of the very troubling ideas and associations that the people who are in charge, the leadership of the Women's March have. Namely, the worst of the worst was Tamika Mallory, who had been a gun rights activist beforehand. She called Louis Farrakhan the GOAT, the greatest of all time. She took lots of Instagram pictures. You should check this, but she, praised him. It wasn't like a casual acquaintance. She praised him as the greatest of all time. And yet, she was treated to glowing profiles in every women's magazine. her and the rest of the leadership. And I basically said, like, let's look past, the Benetton ad of these leaders and actually look at what they believe. And what they believe, some of them, is extremely disturbing, especially when it comes to Jews. So I write this column, and I'm like pilloried for it by the left. One of the leaders of the Women's March, this woman, Bob Bland, wrote this letter to the New York Times where she calls me, it was amazing. I want to find what it was. Oh, she calls me an apologist for the status quo, racist ideology, and the white nationalist patriarchy.
Because you responded to someone
because
who
I
said
said
the greatest of all time
is a man
thinks
who
that
calls
Jewish
Judaism
termites.
Who calls Jews termites, who calls Judaism a gutter religion, who
Yeah.
says that we should burn in ovens, and
Yeah.
who, by the way, is a misogynist homophobe. Also, the leaders of the Women's March are associating with this guy and had the Nation of Islam security protecting them. I mean, this is like the most sort of retrograde hate group. And yet for calling them out, I was called all of these things.
Why do you
Now,
think that flies?
it's a deep question. I think that part of it is the fact that in intersectional left-wing politics, Jews have been whitewashed. Jews are viewed as sort of the white privileged power and part of the white patriarchy, unless they genuflect and say, actually, no, we abhor our privilege and all of the other things that you're supposed to say.
And
there's a
no
blindness to the fact,
differentiation. Go,
right?
please.
And there's a blindness to the fact that, first of all, not all Jews are white. Half of the Jews in the state of Israel, for example, are Arab and from Arab countries that they were kicked out of in 1948. I mean, the idea that Jews are white is this canard. Although I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, my family's from Eastern Europe. I have white skin, but I don't think and I have white privilege, but I don't think of myself as a white person. I think of myself as a Jew first and foremost. So it's a complicated identity. But I think that it's sort of it's whitewashed by these people. And I think that anti-Semitism just isn't taken seriously and doesn't rate because people perceive Jews as having privilege and power in this country, which largely they do. But the fact is that the actual statistics show that more hate crimes were committed against Jews in the past year than any other minority group. The FBI is like sounding the alarm every other day in Crown Heights and in other parts of Brooklyn. Random Jews who look Jewish, right, who are Hasidic Jews, are just beaten up for being Jewish. And yet everyone's ignoring that because they're the imperfect victim.
Well, they're also very isolated. They have their own tribe. They stick with them. They look different. They dress different.
Sure, but
Yeah.
imagine if any other minority group, we're outraged when we see, at least I am, and you are, when we see a police officer assaulting someone,
What I'm saying is
a
that
young black person.
They don't make a big deal to go into the public about it. They keep it almost insulated inside their environment and their community. There's also, what I was going to say is, these people that you do hear saying anti-Semitic things, they're equating American Jews living in America with the policies of Israel and what Israel's doing with Palestine. And that somehow, if you're an American Jew, even if you're not even political, you're somehow or another complicit with atrocities that are going on between the Jewish people and the Palestinians. Or
Right.
conflict, any kind of conflict. And this makes it reinforces their idea about you being a part of this white privileged group.
Yes, but they also strawman it and say criticism of Israel isn't anti-Semitic.
Yes.
No one's saying that criticism of
Right.
Israel is anti-Semitic. I criticize Israel all the time. But there's an obsession on the state of Israel. Like if you were an alien that landed from outer space, you would think that the greatest oppressor in the world is this tiny state that's the size of New Jersey. These people say nothing about generally about the genocide of Uyghur Muslims in China. They say nothing about any number
I'm
of
not even aware of that.
oh, there's a genocide going on carried out by the government of China against Uyghur Muslims. They're literally being put into concentration camps.
This is literally the first I've heard of this.
So Uyghur is spelled U-I-G-H-U-R.
What is a good thing to read about
The
this?
New York Times. We've reported on it. It's an enormous story, and it's like the fact that that's getting that you don't know about it,
Yeah.
and that people obsessively talk about the state of Israel as if it's and by the way, the state of Israel does lots of things wrong, but the idea that it's among the worst human rights tragedies of our time, Are you kidding me? It's insanity.
I don't know the reality of what is going on in Gaza. I don't know what is happening with Israel and Palestine. I don't know. So I'm not going to be the person that talks about this. But what I do know...
I can send you some stuff to read.
What I do know from people that have gone there, like Abby Martin, who came back with some pretty horrific stories, I think there's a lot of terrible shit going on. There's a lot of awful violence, and there's a lot of despair on the side of the Palestinians. And I don't know who's to blame for that. But many people blame the Israelis. They blame the Israelis for treating the Palestinians as if they're in this one area of the world that's essentially a large prison.
Well, lots to say about this, but I think one of the main problems that we have in the way that Israel is covered is that if you have a camera lens and you're only looking at a tiny piece of land, right? You're only looking at Israel proper, the West Bank and Gaza.
Right.
Israel, to some extent, is the Goliath in that situation. But if you zoom out your camera just a little, you see that Israel is literally surrounded on all sides by genocidal regimes, like in the form of Hamas in Gaza, whose charter blames the Jews for fomenting the French revolutions, the Russian revolutions, both world wars, and says that it wants to kill all the Jews. That's the government of Gaza right now. I spoke to a mother who fled Gaza recently, okay, and her family's house was just destroyed. Who was it destroyed by? Hamas, not Israel. You never hear those stories. So I'm just saying it is a very complicated politics, but when you see people obsessively focusing on this one state and the crimes of this one state to the exclusion of actual dictatorships in the world who are killing their own people, you have to be suspicious of that.
You do have to be suspicious. And you do have to be aware of their position in the world surrounded by Arab states. And you do have to realize that they are, they're alone out there.
Yes.
You also, I do wonder, what is the motivation for so many people focusing on Jews? What is it? Like, what do you think it is as a Jewish person? What do you think the motivation for this kind of racism and discrimination against Jews, and why is it tolerated? Why can someone like Louis Farrakhan tweet that the Jews are termites and his Twitter account stays up?
Well, it's the oldest hatred in the world, right? A lot of
Is that what it is?
No. You're asking me why is it still with us? It's like the mystery of history. Like that is deep. I mean, that is something that goes back to the New Testament. Okay, the Jews were blamed in the book of John and Mark. I mean, we could go to Matthew for the death of Jesus. Their role in that story, at least according to some of the books, is that they convinced the most powerful empire at the time, the Roman Empire, in the form of the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, to kill the Son of God. That becomes sort of the template for the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. There's a confusion about what anti-Semitism is, right? It's not just a hate. It's not just like this hate of a group. Racists perceive themselves as punching down against a group that's lesser. Anti-Semites perceive themselves as punching up against this secret cabal of wily operators who secretly control the levers of power. That is the canard of anti-Semitism. And that begins with this group that's able somehow to get the Roman Empire to kill Jesus. Now, the Catholic Church disavows this in 1965, which was, an enormous historical event. But that template is still there. And you see it play out, right, in who led us into the war in Iraq. It was the Jews of the Bush administration. You can see it play itself out all over the place. And right now, in the demonology of contemporary anti-Semitism, Israel has sort of been made into the Jew among the nations. You're not allowed to say anymore, like the old school anti-Semitism, right? Like I grew up in a place where there were some country clubs where Jews couldn't go into them. That, frankly, that's not dangerous. What's dangerous is the kind of anti-Semitism that says, this one state in the world of all of the almost 200 states, that's the one that doesn't have the right to exist. That's the one that should be dismantled. That's actually dangerous to Jewish lives right now.
It is, it's an unusual group in that it is both a religion and a tribe.
Yes. It makes us very hard to understand in the contemporary landscape because we are not just a religion.
There's nothing else like it because most Jews that I know do not practice Judaism. but
Right,
they
and yet
consider
they-
themselves Jews.
Yes, because
Yeah.
we were a peoplehood before we were
Yeah.
a religion.
Yeah.
Religion is a very contemporary, modern thing that Jews are sort of slotted into, and it makes us easier to understand. But then our sort of national identity or our peoplehood, our tribalism is left out. And that's
Yeah.
an essential part of who the Jews are.
My friend Ari Shafir, who's a fantastic stand-up comedian, he's a rabid atheist, but he's also very Jewish. And he has a new hour that he's working on right now that he's going to film called Jew.
Really?
And he's an atheist.
Oh, I want to see it.
Yeah, it's great. But he's a perfect
Catalan is what
example.
you
But
It is
that's
a
also-
tribe. It's not just a religion.
But it's also
Stay
because
focused.
the Jewish religion itself, the emphasis is not on what you believe. The emphasis is on deeds. It almost doesn't matter what you believe. It matters that you follow halakha, which is Jewish law. It matters your deeds. It matters all these things. So it's possible to be a good Jew and not really think about God that much, which is very strange, I understand, to Christian ears.
Right. Or you go full Ben Shapiro, where he's both a good Jew and very much like follows the whole deal. Wears
follows the whole
yarmulke,
deal.
the whole deal. Why do you think?
But I think, sorry, can I say one
No,
more
please,
thing?
please.
I just find it like kind of astonishing, the blindness to this, because imagine a leader of the Women's March said something like, you know, I think Louis C.K. is the greatest comedian of all time, even though I disavow X, Y, and Z thing that he did. How fast till that person was kicked out of the leadership of the Women's March? It would be like minutes,
Do you
hours.
think?
Yes. I think there are certain things that get people outraged and other much worse things that do not. And I'm fascinated by why that is.
Do you think that if it was a white person that had this opinion about the Jews, that it would be more scrutinized?
I think that it is much easier to fight anti-Semitism when it comes in the form of Richard Spencer, yes.
Yes.
Because then there's liberal consensus, right?
Yes.
About him.
And
He's
there's
bad.
also, you have a green light to criticize.
Yeah.
It's very
It is much
criticizing a
harder
person of color.
when exactly. It's much harder when someone like Ilhan Omar, the new freshman senator, the new freshman congresswoman from Minnesota, who's like this incredible American dream story, comes here at 12 years old, refugee from Somalia, wears a hijab, is a mother, is the first woman of color representing Minnesota. Like, obviously, I want to cheer her. That's my reaction to her. And yet she has this tweet that she refused to apologize for, where she says, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the world to the evil doings of Israel. I'm sorry, that's a classically anti-Semitic trope, even if she said it unwittingly. And by this point, she should educate herself. So it's much harder to criticize that, but it's an untenable position to say that you can't criticize someone for their ideas because of their identity.
It also seems
It's like a road to nowhere.
If you're going to say that, that is a very vague thing to say. You should be incredibly specific. If you want to say it's evil, you should say what's evil and then open that up to some sort of a discussion or debate. What is evil?
But ascribing
general,
supernatural
right.
evil powers to a
Right.
state is very much recalling classic anti-Semitic canards.
Right.
So I wrote a piece about this today, trying to explain that to people.
Yes, I
because she
saw
went
the
on
piece.
CNN saying, "I don't know how Jewish Americans could be offended by this," which I think is incredible.
Yeah. What do you think, if you want to be objective, step outside of your Jewish identity, what do you think is wrong with how Israel is dealing with the Palestinian situation? Because this is the big criticism of Israel, the only criticism. Really, that's the big one. The big one is Gaza and Palestine. So what do you think they're doing wrong?
Palestine meaning the West Bank.
Yes.
Well, I would say what the untenable position that they're in is that they are occupying another people. That is what is going on in the West Bank. And I've been there many times, met with many Palestinians. I've really educated myself on this. The problem is that, and by the way, it's not all of Palestine. All of the West Bank, there's areas A, B, and C. It's a really, we'd have to pull up a map. It's a pretty complicated thing. There are places where it's much more autonomous and the PA is in charge, and it really varies depending on the area. So the big criticism, right, is that they're occupying another people, and that is corrosive to the state of Israel, sort of morally, to occupy another people. On the other hand, what happens if they pull out of the West Bank tomorrow, right? I'm for a two-state solution, ultimately ending the occupation. But if I'm real, I have to be honest about what that would look like. Well, what it looked like in Gaza is that now you have a terrorist statelet right at the border, which is ruled by Hamas. It is quite likely that that very same thing could happen in the West Bank. Now, let's say, we actually should pull up a map.
Okay.
Let's say Israel does that. Then, like, the whole of Israel proper is something like, we have to look, 2 miles wide?
You ever see it?
We actually, we should look at the distance between, like, Tulkarm, or like the end of the West Bank, and Netanya, or Tel Aviv, and you see how small that is. I mean, it's hard to even conceive of it. If you're in charge of protecting the security of the people who live in places, which, by the way, 10 years ago, the year after high school, when I was living there were suicide bombings blowing up in cafes around the corner from where I lived. Are you going to subject those people to that risk? I mean, that's the actual question facing the government of Israel, which, by the way, I'm extremely critical of. And if I lived in Israel, I'd be voting, center-left in Israel for sure. But that is what they're facing. And then if you zoom out and you pull up a map of all of the countries around it, I just want, look. No, it's okay. Actually, the one you were on was good because it showed, if you zoomed out, it had everything. So you have Egypt there, then you have Jordan, which is teetering, then you have Syria, then you have Lebanon, and Hezbollah's on the southern border of Lebanon, which is constantly, so that's the real thing. So when people talk about this fantasy of, why can't it just look like America? Why can't there just be a democratic one-state solution? First of all, no one there wants it. They poll people constantly. But the second thing is, is that really what that's going to look like if we dismantle the state of Israel? Or is it going to look like enormous bloodshed, the likes of which we see in a lot of these countries surrounding it? Someone once said to me that if you want to know the word for, a Jew without a military, it's the Yazidis. Okay, it's the Yazidis. It's the people, it's the minorities in the Middle East who have been absolutely destroyed and overrun. And this is I don't think when Americans talk about this part of the world, they fully appreciate the sort of absolutely painful and hard decisions and the grappling with violence, really. What happened to Jamal Khashoggi in that Saudi embassy, that's normative for this part of the world. So the fact that Israel has somehow, with all of its flaws, managed to eke out a Western-style liberal democracy, frankly, the only place where you and I would feel happy and comfortable living, why are we never talking about that?
Well, I think it's very difficult for people to find the forum to discuss it the way you just did, and to really lay it out in cold, stark reality. What is the solution? What is the solution? I mean, there
is no magic. The solution
right
now is to do everything possible to build up the Palestinian economy, for Israel to build relationships. Right now it has a very, very positive relationships with Egypt, which gave back the Sinai, which it had won in the Six-Day War, I believe, gave it back to Egypt for a cold peace, which it's had. It has a good relationship, of all things, who would have thought, with Saudi Arabia because of their common enemy, Iran. I mean, things shift there rapidly. But as for the Palestinians, the solution is to build up the economy, make life better, and support people and movements inside the West Bank that are genuinely nonviolent. And those people exist. It's just, frankly, oftentimes they're murdered by groups like Hamas and their bodies are dragged through the streets. If you're accused of being an Israeli collaborator in the West Bank, you know what happens to you? You're lynched. No one talks about that.
No one does talk about that. Would you be open to discussing this in this sort of a forum with that woman from the Women's March?
Sure.
Do you think she would do something like that?
I don't know. I'd be open to it.
Do you think that people like her have ever had a conversation with someone like you who could lay it out that way?
No, because I think that, first of all, many people who talk about this issue have sort of exported American domestic politics to a foreign region of the world. In a way that this is talked about a lot. It's the oppressor, the oppressed, the white, the black. No, that's not what's going on. I don't think people understand when they talk about Israeli Jews that half of them are Middle Eastern. Like, half of Israeli Jews are Arab. There's no appreciation of that reality. They think that Israel was just founded, to save the remnant of the Jews who weren't destroyed in the Holocaust. And yeah, it helped for those who survived. But then once the state of Israel was established, there was a mass exodus of the Jews from all of the Arab countries where they had been living as second-class citizens, where they were either self-deported because they were living as second-class citizens or they were expelled. Again, that exodus, that deportation, never talked about. I would be happy to talk about this with someone from the Women's March.
What is the response currently? Like, what is the current position that most people are taking about that woman and about the Women's March in general because of these things, because of these anti-Semitic statements?
I think a lot of people in the past few weeks, thanks in part to Meghan McCain, had 5 minutes on The View with Tamika Mallory and Bob Bland, and she did an amazing job grilling them on this.
Imagine that, The View. The View is what's changed, but it's crazy.
But it's amazing.
Yeah,
I know,
amazing.
but she did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Because frankly, because their image was so powerful in the same way that the image at the Lincoln Memorial was so powerful. Right. Journalists just sort of accepted it and didn't interrogate
kitty cat
them.
Hats, 500,000 people in the streets.
Who doesn't want to
Right.
support that? But it's our job to be skeptical and criticize.
Right.
So I think finally a lot of people woke up to it. But again, I wrote that column in August 2017, and it took until now. Everything in that column is the thing people are talking about. There was also an amazing 10,000-word expose in Tablet magazine, a Jewish online magazine, that did a lot of that work. So I think it did reach a tipping point. The thing that is, I see a lot of my friends on the left who are Jewish grappling with is that they so desperately want to be a part of these movements that they're willing to sort of check their identity at the door in order to gain entry. And my thing is, any progressive movement that's asking you to check your Jewish identity at the door, your full Jewish identity, which is acknowledging that we're not just a faith, but we're a people. We're not just people that have matzo ball soup. We're something bigger than that. That's not a space I want to be a part of. They would never ask that of any other group. Why us?
Well, why? Why do they ask that? That's what the real question is.
It
doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, I think a lot of it goes back to what I was saying before, which is this misunderstanding. If you see the world in an intersectional way, okay, not as intersectionality was originally meant to be, but how it functions in the world. It functions as a caste system. And the higher you are on the victim scale, at least on the left, and it's reverse on the right, right? On the right, it's like white cisgendered men are at the top. On the left, they're at the bottom. And the Jews are somewhere close down to there, at least in the way that the left, I mean, this part of the left we're talking about, the fringe, at least for now, perceive the Jews to be.
The woke left.
Yeah. The Jews the Jews don't rate. The Jews don't have a place in that victim scale because they've achieved so much success, because they can pass as white, because of any number of things. And so I think that that's a huge reason for it, which is a huge reason why I think intersectionality is a dead end and why we need to be talking about ideas and not identity, right? Like that is the thing about America that is so amazing. And I know it sounds cheesy, but I really feel it, that makes us so special. We are not a country based on blood and soil. We are a country whose national common identity is based on ascribing to a common set of ideas. That is what we're about. And so any politics that's insisting from the left or the right that no, actually what we are is this warring set of groups competing for scarce resources, absolutely not. To me, those kinds of politics are un-American.
I couldn't agree more in terms of identity. I think identity politics and the idea that you belong to a group is so intoxicating but so dangerous. It's so important to treat people as individuals. It's so important to think of yourself as an individual. And this need to become a part of this group and a signal to that group is a big part of the problem that we're having right now.
And it doesn't mean that you can't have pride. I have tremendous pride, the most, in being a Jew. And Jonathan Haidt talks so brilliantly about good identity politics and bad identity politics, that good identity politics says, walk with me in my shoes. It's like a big tent sort of thing. It says, come along with me while I explain to you my experience in the world. Bad identity politics says, you can never escape the gender, the racial, the economic lane you were born into, and don't even try and understand me because you couldn't possibly. That's bad identity politics. And I think that that's in force and rising right now in the country. And I think that that's dangerous. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it's Martin Luther King Day. And he said this like unbelievable thing about, I think it's actually in the I Had a Dream speech, but where he talks about the promissory note of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, right? That these people who wrote it, who were slave owners, didn't even know that in writing it, that every American was going to fall heir to this promissory note. And it's like he saw himself, even in documents that were written by people who would not have seen him as fully human, as a way of sort of using that common set of values, those common documents, to like write himself into the story. Like that is an example of inclusive identity politics, and like calling on the thing that we have in common to widen the tent. And I just don't see a lot of that happening these days. I really butchered that, but everyone should look up.
Didn't.
No, I did. If you look up, Jonathan Haidt gave a speech. I think you can find the whole text of it at City Journal. But if you just look up Jonathan Haidt, Good Identity Politics, Martin Luther King, he does an amazing job. It's really moving.
His book, The Happiness Hypothesis, I'm in the middle of it right now. It's so good. It's so fantastic. It's so crucial for people that want to understand their own personal biases and what's
He's
causing
amazing.
it. He's amazing. He was on here last week.
I saw it. I thought he was incredible.
Yeah, he is. The idea of having pride in something is interesting, right? You know, there's a lot of people that have pride for their ethnicity, although they had nothing to do with choosing it. It's just something that they're born with. I think people get nervous about that kind of pride. But I think there should be a set, like, it would be wonderful if we could keep all of these cultures and yet all appreciate each other as equals. It would be wonderful if you could go and eat Ethiopian food one day or Cuban food the next day, and these people exist in these small...
Well, you can. That's the beauty of this country.
Right now you can. Right now you can. But as we get more and more homogenized, I wonder if you will be able to.
Wait, more homogenized or more insistent on you have to stay in your lane?
There's both things. I think we're definitely cooking off the bacteria as well. We're homogenization is where we're making things safer and easier for everybody. And there's some messiness. There's messiness to cultures exchanging with each other.
But
it's
so
also
exciting.
fantastic.
Like,
it's very exciting.
I have to say, I loved
one of the best
Australia,
parts.
but when I get off that plane and I land at, like, as shitty as they are, JFK or LaGuardia, and I see, like, every kind of human being on the planet, you know, and, like, I walk every day I live in Manhattan, and I walk to work, like, there and back every day. It just helps me decompress. And the kind of, like, the diversity of people on the sidewalk of Midtown Manhattan is amazing. Like, I find it to be the most exciting thing in the world. And the fact that we're able to live among such difference and not kill each other.
What's one of
is
the
a
problems with
miracle.
Los Angeles?
Is what? Driving.
We don't have that. Yeah.
Oh, you don't have that?
People
or you
drive.
Yeah.
They're isolated.
I love it here, but that's why I couldn't live here.
Well, no one walks. Everyone's locked in together in their car. They stay in their neighborhood, and they drive out to go somewhere else, and they don't interact with each other. On the street, one of the things about the subway and one of the things about walking on the street is everybody's together. Everyone's together. And there's this interesting melting pot of human beings that exists in New York. It doesn't exist anywhere else in that form. Like, Boston is so much more white. It's so much more... I mean, there's a lot of ethnicities, but it's not the same. New York is fucking flavorful. There's a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of great parts to it. It's also, what concerns me is that people in New York are uniquely hostile. And then I always feel
Are we?
Yeah, for sure. I always
Are you experiencing me that way?
Not you. You're very nice. But a lot of people that I'm even friends with from New York, I'm like, you motherfuckers are stacked on top of each other too much. You don't... People aren't unique. Like,
although, to be fair, I'm from Pittsburgh, so you might be getting that, like, Midwestern flavor.
I bet that's exactly what it is. Pittsburgh's different. A little more relaxed, less people. You have to count on each other more. And fucking snow gets you. You know, it gets rough out there. You know, it's not like you're not in a city the same way. It's not, you got to drive places. It's different. You know, that is very Midwesty. Pittsburgh's very Midwest.
Pittsburgh's the best.
It's a nice place. I like Pittsburgh. But New York, I love New York. But New York always makes me feel like when you have that many people slammed on top of each other. You're in this completely unnatural environment that literally has never existed in human nature up until a few hundred years ago. It never happened like that. And now it's unprecedented because there's more and more people there. They're just buzzing, and they're putting these buildings up where you got 100 floors. My friend Jim Norton talks about it all the time
there something
because
you
he lives in a
wanted
building. He
from
goes, I don't know a fucking person in my building. There's 1,000
I
people in
could
this
never
building.
live in a building like that. I could never live in a high-rise building. It freaks me out too much.
So what do you live in, like
Like
a
a brown-
small walk?
Yeah.
brownstone.
I live in a
That's-
fifth-floor walk-up.
Yeah, that's a good move. That's a good move.
I mean, the
Look, this-
walk-up sucks, but but knowing your neighbor, I
also think as an
high-rises
intellectual,
freak me out.
as an intellectual, like as a person like yourself, I think it's incredibly important to experience this. There's an exchange of cultures and of thought in New York that you just don't get. You don't get on the West Coast. It's also not entertainment based. There's a frivolousness to the thought process out here that's flavored by the desire for fame. It's unavoidable.
Yeah. But the one thing I'll say is that, it's important for that, and I find it so energizing. New York, all the reasons you said. But I also have to force myself to get out of the bubble. Like, I go home to Pittsburgh, and I hear a lot more, oftentimes, political and intellectual diversity than I hear sometimes in a week in New York.
Right, because everyone's left.
Most people.
Everyone in New
And
York.
most of my friends are.
Yeah.
Not everyone.
Not
but,
everyone in
but
New York.
most.
There's conservative people in New York, obviously.
Most.
It's
And that's
a
certainly
super,
normative.
super left-leaning city.
But
As
then you
is
go to
Los
Pittsburgh
Angeles.
and it's like, oh, people believe a lot of things. My mom was the one who told me that Trump was going to win.
Whoa.
Because for her business, we live in Squirrel Hill, my family. I was bat mitzvahed in the synagogue that was shot up. So that's where we live in Squirrel Hill, in the Jewish neighborhood. But my mom, for her work, has to drive 2 or 3 hours out of the city. And during, the campaign, she would, everyone I knew thought Hillary was going to win, including me. And she called me and said, Barry, you would not believe the homemade signs. There are giant homemade signs on the side of people's houses and barns that are enormous, that took them many hours to make. There's a passion for him that I don't think people are fully appreciating. I didn't see that. Everyone I knew was voting for Hillary Clinton.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it's like for you out here.
It's the same. It's incredibly, not only is it incredibly left-leaning, but is also the entertainment aspect of it where people have to signal the fact that they're left. So they go out of their way to project this image of being progressive on top of being progressive. It's almost critical to your job. You have to show everybody you can out progressive the people around you.
But then in secret, do they tell you what they really think? Because you're a safe person?
No, not those people. The people that are like, man, I don't like her, but he's such a piece of shit. I'm going to vote for her anyway. That was more common.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was, socially, people appreciate the Democrats and the left because they feel like socially, in terms of here's a perfect example. When Barack Obama was a president, people can criticize his policies and the whistleblower, the fact that he cracked down on whistleblowers, and the fact that there was more innocents killed by drone strikes and all that stuff. There's certainly some. It's an impossible job. No one's perfect as a president. But what he did do was first of all, he represented the fact that a minority, an African American who was born from a single mother, can somehow or another rise to be the president of the United States and be incredibly well-spoken and measured and calm, and just seems to know how to carry himself and makes us feel like someone better than us is in a position of power. And it also, I feel like there was a lot of racism from horrible white people that looked at him in a terrible way and saw this black person trying to destroy America. But way more people that aren't racist go, look at that. You can't have an African-American president. Look at this. Like, we're getting better. Like, that's how I felt. I felt like we're getting better, like culturally, the way we communicate. We don't have that right now, and we didn't have that with her.
No.
What she represented was same old thing. The thing that's been fucking you, and the reason why your family lost the farm, and the reason why, and this Donald Trump's going to come in here and he's going to clean up the swamp. And when he came out with that drain the swamp and, lock her up, build that wall, he boiled it down so that the people that don't have the time or the inclination to really deep dive into their own personal biases, to their own objective reasoning, and find out why do I think the way I think? If the people that don't have that thought, all that build that wall shit was perfect.
Right.
Line it up. And that's most folks. Most folks don't have the time. Most folks work all day. They're tired. They have a family. They probably have a hobby. They don't have the fucking time. You are a person who thinks for a living. You think and write for a living. You're constantly involved.
Well, one thing I'm seeing when I ask you about like people telling you their secret thought crimes.
Yeah.
I am noticing, and in a weird way, this gives me kind of a hope. There is a big gap between people's public personas of the politics that they preach and then what they really think and what they'll say around a kitchen table.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are experiencing what I think about as like second woke. Like they're seeing the poverty or the flaws in the woke worldview and that there are holes with it, but they're kind of too scared to say that out loud because they know it'll be a loss of friends and social capital and everything else. But those people talk to me a lot. Those people send me emails a lot. And oftentimes they're people with platforms who don't want to lose their audience.
Yes.
And I find that somewhat hopeful.
I find it somewhat hopeful too, but
But they have to nut up.
Yes.
Like come out, nut up. I'm on Rogan. I figured I'd say something like that.
That's it. Say nut up. It's a good way. But you're right. That the thought process behind nutting up is exactly what they need to do.
Like
and if more people did it, I think you'd realize, like, wow, we're kind of surrounded. It's almost like.
Well, okay. What I think about I am never the smartest person in any room. I'm not brilliant. I promise you.
Probably the smartest person in this room.
No. I don't know. Jamie hasn't talked.
Trust me.
What makes me... the only reason I'm sitting here is that I have slightly more courage than most people and that I'm willing to say what I think to hell with pissing some people off or losing some friends that weren't really my friends. Most people aren't willing to do that, actually.
Well, what I like about your writing and what I like about talking to you today is that you represent reason and well thought out opinions. And those two things are very rare. Well thought out opinions are way more rare, in my opinion, than what you usually get. What you usually get is a conglomeration of opinions that seem to make sense peripherally or casually. They have a veneer of logic to them. And you're like, I'll go with that because I don't have the time. Because most people don't have the time.
Well, going back to Israel, I know are we wrapping up?
No.
Going back to Israel for 1 second, it's become like a pillar, right? It's like, okay, if you're on the left, I believe in, criminal justice reform, like any number of things. Oh, and by the way, Israel's bad. Like it became one of those things that most people don't really think about.
Right.
And I think it's really important to think about things issue by issue and not just be like, yep, signing up for this whole slew of policies and views on things when actually some of those things don't go together at all.
Well, one thing in the woke left you're not allowed to do is criticize the more repressive aspects of Islam. You're not allowed to. You don't do it. If you bring up anything, it becomes Islamophobic, and even if it's homophobic thought, if the ideas are homophobic, or if women have to wear restrictive clothing, any of the things that are incredibly commonplace, you are not allowed to criticize those because those fall into a protected category.
I remember when I first ran into this in college when we were talking, I was in a conversation with other feminists, and I definitely consider myself a feminist, about female genital mutilation. And I encountered for the first time a species that I've come to know well, which is feminists who sort of defend female genital mutilation on the grounds of cultural relativism. Who are we to judge? And I remember just like, I did not get over the shock of that.
You shouldn't get over the shock.
I'm
of
not.
That. That is fucking terrifying. I mean, that is, look, I'm a outspoken, rabid critic of circumcision. I think it's disgusting. I think it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But at least your dick still works. The idea that someone tried to equate circumcision and female genital mutilation, a person on the left did, when I talked about it recently.
Who?
Some fucking asshole online. I don't remember who it was, but you know, I didn't even exchange. I read it and I went, their vagina doesn't work the same way anymore. Do you understand that you can't have an orgasm anymore?
Exactly.
You're cutting off a woman's clitoris to not because of cleanliness or any fucking weird logic that they're using today to try to justify circumcision. Way worse. You're doing it to try to eliminate pleasure because you don't want the woman to leave. It's the same reason why you want to cover her up with some crazy garb that doesn't show her skin.
Why aren't we hearing the leaders of the women's march talk about, say, I don't know, honor killings, female genital mutilation,
restrictive clothing,
forced marriage for
right.
girls,
children? Yeah.
No, instead they're talking about BDS in Israel. I don't get it. I'd love to ask someone about that. Also, have you been to Israel?
No, I have not.
I want to take you.
Uh-oh.
Say yes.
I would go.
Yes.
I would go. I would certainly go. I got to bring Ari, though. He'll translate.
Okay. Is that the guy with Jew?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a good friend. And he loves to travel, too, so he'd be down in a heartbeat. What was I going to say? Oh, why is it that... Do you think that... Here's a better way for it. Do you think there's too many things to pay attention to?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not just worldwide.
I feel that myself.
Yeah, but even in terms of like left versus right in these positions, like I often talk to people about gun control, and when people find out that I own guns and that I'm not entirely in favor of Second Amendment being repealed, one thing that drives me crazy is they want to always bring up school shootings, mass shootings, all these different things, which I agree are a horrific, terrible occurrence in our culture and is happening in this insanely frequent way, and it doesn't make sense. What people don't want to talk about is that almost all those people are on psych medication. Almost all of them.
Right.
Now, correlation does not equal causation. Them being on the psych medicine might be the same reason why they're shooting up schools in the first place. They're incredibly
But the fact
damaged.
that you could be mentally unwell and legally buy a gun is insane.
It's insane.
That's actually
Agreed.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
agreed.
I know you agree.
100%. Not only do I think that you should, then here's the question: who is the person to decide? And this is what the NRA would say, and this is what pro Second Amendment people would say. Who are you to decide whether or not someone is healthy enough or well enough to own a gun? And does a person who is on antidepressants or a person who has psychological problems not have the ability to defend themselves if they have never exhibited violence? So here's the problem. A lot of these motherfuckers, they don't exhibit violence until they break, until they pop, and then they go shoot up a school. Sometimes there's threats like Adam Lanza or a couple other ones where the FBI comes and visits them and they talk to them, or the guy in Colorado where they knew he was like hanging on by a string.
But like the guy in Pittsburgh,
yes.
you know, he was on that Gab, which I think is like a far right, or it's definitely used by the far right.
It's used by the far right.
Okay.
The problem is when you have no restriction whatsoever, and you have restriction on all these other ones, right? If you say something anti-Semitic or racist on Twitter, they will ban you. If you do it on Facebook, they'll ban you. And Gab is committed 100% to free speech. I've read things the owners of Gab have said about this, and that they're very steadfast in their support for freedom of speech because they think what I said earlier, that the best way to ensure that good ideas get through is to not suppress bad ideas, but to combat them with better ideas.
All I was going to say is that the guy who shot up
Was
the
on
synagogue
Gab,
in Pittsburgh
yeah.
was saying the most horrific things about the kike infestation in
And
the
you
country.
can get away with that on Gab. And that's where the question is, well, should someone like Roku pull Alex Jones? Should they take off,
I think that this is a real
right-wing-
question. Like, as
It's a real
someone who
question.
finds myself on, making the free speech argument a lot, I think it's something that we really, really have to grapple with.
It's almost like we're dealing with crude tools. Like we're trying to perform surgery with hatchets. Like fuck, man. Like,
yeah, there is-
how do you get to
but-
those people and have that discussion with all those people?
But this is, in terms of there being too much to talk about and cover, that's where I do think that things like the New York Times can make a real contribution. Because there are adults in the room deciding what the important news is that you should pay attention to.
Yes.
In theory, at least.
Well, no, I wholeheartedly
And
agree.
You're going to learn about the genocide of the Uyghur Muslims in the New York Times. Like, if you really read the New York Times every day, you're going to know a lot about the world, and you're going to understand that the government shutdown is a bigger deal than what happened at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. If you're just trolling through Twitter, which is how, every person I know, or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever, like my youngest sister, how she gets her news, you're not going to necessarily know that. That's a real problem.
It is. a real
I don't know
problem.
how to solve it, other than tell people to subscribe to newspapers which still have some standards and which still, when they make a mistake, correct the mistake.
How many of those are allowed?
There's a few.
Yeah.
I work at one of them.
You work at one of them. You definitely do. I mean, look, I said something to someone from the New York Times online after an article that they wrote about a fight. It was a boxing match between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Where
I saw it.
It was a great fight. Floyd Mayweather schooled him. But at the end, it said that Conor McGregor's face was swollen and bleeding, and he was knocked through the ropes. And I said, you can't say that, because everybody saw the fight. That didn't happen. In this crazy time where everybody is crying out for fake news, you can't say his face was covered in blood when there was no blood. You can't say that. Don't do that.
Was it corrected?
It was corrected, which
There
is
you
so
go.
rare.
But it's actually not we correct things
Yes.
all the time.
Right. But how do you stop it from happening in the first place?
It's
How do you
really
stop that
hard.
first one?
Well, no, the first one is really hard. It's
Blood?
No.
Blood when it doesn't
no,
exist?
No. When I'm saying it's really hard, what I mean is journalists just shouldn't make mistakes like that.
Right.
But we do. The difference with the New York Times and any number of these other places is that we say we made a mistake and we
Yes.
correct.
Well, it's hyperbole.
That matters.
Right?
Yeah, it's purple
just-
prose. It's like
Right.
someone getting ahead of themselves, having a little too much fun. I don't
Yeah.
remember that article.
Well, it wasn't. I don't necessarily think it's getting ahead. I mean, it's fiction. They applied fiction to an actual sport event, which I thought was bizarre. But
But they corrected it.
they did correct it. Well, here's what's important. What's important is you can at least get a better version of the facts there than you can anywhere else.
Yes, and I guess there's some people in the new media landscape that I see, and I don't know if it's because they want to sort of gin up their own audiences or what, nihilistically getting on, using Trumpist language to describe the press. What they don't see, I think what they don't understand is that the loss of trust in the press is a symptom of the loss of trust in lots of public institutions. The WHO, the World Health Organization, just came out with this terrifying report where one of the top 10 threats to health in, I think, the country, we should look this up, is people who aren't getting vaccines. People who think vaccines cause autism and are not getting vaccines. The stakes of loss of trust in public institutions doesn't just mean you're gonna hurt the New York Times bottom line. It's a threat to all of our health, quite literally.
Right.
I see these things as being very, very connected. So when I see people gleefully celebrating the fake news of the New York Times, I'm like, do you have a better alternative right now? You know?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. Not you, but
No, yeah, no, I agree. I
like,
think
I
you're
don't
absolutely
understand
right.
why anyone would celebrate
I
that.
think it falls into what we were talking about before, that it's an easily digestible ideology that you can just subscribe to. It's a conglomeration of preformed opinions, and you lock in, you start saying fake news. And it's also, it's exacerbated by this situation that we find ourselves in where people aren't really buying newspapers anymore. You have to get people to subscribe. You know, I subscribe to several. On my phone and on my computer, and that's how I digest things now, or an iPad. When you think about what they have to do to get those clicks, you know, and you see these weird, like, look, this is not a knock on Forbes. I think Forbes is an excellent periodical. They're great. They write some really important stuff, but almost every month they will write this super clickbaity thing about cell phones. Like, it comes with a nasty surprise. The new Galaxy S10 has a nasty surprise, and it's so unimaginative.
Is it always
that they
nasty?
Yes. Look, see if you can find how many nasty surprise articles
Really?
about iPhones and iPads.
I see them about video games and stuff a lot
Yep.
too. They have like a contributor network that people are just allowed to write articles on, and how they allow
Right.
that.
That
Like,
makes
remember
sense.
Huffington Post used to have that too?
Yeah, that fucking stuff is so dangerous, because as soon as people lose their trust that you are unbiased and you're giving them an objective perspective on exactly what's going on, as soon as that, I mean, it might be nothing when it comes to Galaxy S10s or whatever the fuck they're talking about. This has a nasty surprise, but it flavors your perspective on news.
Of course it does.
And these people are fighting for their life. Journalists and people and
Helios
contributors to
will
these
win this
websites and newspapers are fighting for their
Helios
life
will win
because
this conflict.
everything is dropping off. The revenues are down. The revenues are and then, like, what takes their place? What takes their place? Bloggers? Who's looking at them? Are you sure that they have journalistic ethics and standards that are like what we would expect from?
They don't.
They know, right? They don't have to. And this brings you to the Infowars thing, right?
Yeah, I've just
If
been
that's-
thinking about that.
That's if he's a journalist.
No, he's definitely not a journalist.
But this,
not a question about
right,
that.
This is what people are fighting about. This is the whole shebang. Like, if some of that news that you're getting in these traditional venues is fake, it is dangerous. If any of it is clickbaity, if any of it is
I
deceptive,
could not agree with you more.
it's fucking dangerous.
Especially because we have a president who attacks the press as the enemy. Remember, like, let's not forget the context we're operating in.
Yes.
You know, we have Trump calling us the enemy of the people.
So crazy.
Like,
The lack of understanding of
and he's
how
driven some
important
people
news is.
insane.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. They were easy to drive insane, though. Let's be honest. There's a lot of dummies out there. That's part of the problem. It's so easy to prod a certain group, and they're like, I'm going to do something about this. This is the danger. This is what you have to worry about. The people that and again, they're signaling too. They're signaling to the far right. They're signaling to those people. I know a lot of people like that. Not that would, shoot people, but I know a lot of people that are signalers, that like far right signalers. Like, they'll see things, and I've talked to people that are, I hope Trump wins because we got to put a stop to all this nonsense.
What's the nonsense?
It's progressive nonsense. The idea of socialists like Bernie Sanders going to come along and take all your money. We're struggling, hard-working Americans. We got to put America first. Put America first. It's just lack of understanding about the complexity of the entire landscape. The entire landscape in terms of economics, the entire landscape in terms of international politics, all of it, all the above, the war machine, the lack of understanding about the military-industrial complex and the influence that it has. The lack of understanding about the bankers, about how few people went to jail after the fucking crazy economic collapse that we just recovered from. What? Have you seen Inside Job? You seen that documentary? It's an amazing documentary, but it's all about the
Who made
financial
it?
collapse. Pull that up, find out. I watched it. It's from 2000. I want to say 10, 11, but it's so sobering when you have this guy who's an economics, a real true economics expert, questioning these people who, in many cases, they're economics professors at major universities who give advice. Okay, 2010, I was right. Charles Ferguson, that was the gentleman. He did a good job. I know, it's so sad. He's a good guy. I met him, but he's forever.
I just love that movie
forever
more than
flamed.
anything.
Team America is one of the greatest movies of all
It
time.
really is. That ideology should rule the world.
Yes, yeah. And you know what I love about it more than anything? The whole idea that actors have to save the world.
But just the analogy in the
Yes.
end is so brilliant. The
Yeah.
dicks, pussies, and assholes.
Yes.
I inadvertently saw that movie with my dad and my grandfather, and I will never forget the puppet sex scene watching that
It's so
next to
good.
them.
I wonder
Yeah,
if you
it's
could
so
even
good,
make
but you
that
should
movie
never
today.
see that
Oh, right, next to your dad.
next to your
Yeah.
dad and your
No.
grandpa. No, you should. You could never make that movie.
You know what I made the
They
mistake of doing
make
yesterday?
bold choices.
I watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective with my 8-year-old and my
I
10-year-old.
haven't seen that since it came out. Was it good still?
I didn't realize how transphobic that fucking movie is.
Is it? I don't remember
Spoiler
it.
alert, the whole premise is that
You
there
can't
was a
spoiler
football...
alert Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
I had to spoiler alert it myself because I forgot. The whole premise was what this guy steals a dolphin, and when he steals a dolphin, Ace Ventura finds, because he's a pet detective, finds a tiny ruby that's at the bottom of this dolphin tank that is missing from a Miami Dolphins ring. And he finds out through this exhaustive search that the one guy who he couldn't account for his ring was a kicker who fucked up the World Series, or the Super Bowl, rather.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this guy that they found out is Sean Young in the movie, who's gorgeous. And then in the movie, take that down, please. So in the movie, at the end of it, the reveal is that Sean Young is really this football player who wants to get back at Dan Marino because he goes psycho because the world hates him because he blew the kick. So he's a guy pretending to be a woman, and Ace Ventura made out with him, and just like everyone,
Freaks
all the
out.
cops are throwing up. Everyone's throwing up.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. Oh no! It's off the charts. At the end, he pulls her top off and she has breasts. He was like trying to show that she didn't really have breasts, and she did. And he's like, well, anybody can get those in an afternoon. But what about this? And he pulls her pants down, and then he goes by, and then everybody sees her, and she's got her legs together, so you can't see her penis. And then from behind, you see her junk is pressed up against her butt cheeks because she's tucked her penis and her vagina. So the cops all start throwing up. And then cops start cleaning. Cops that made out with her start cleaning their
what the
mouth off. They start chewing giant wad. That's her at the end.
Oh, my
this is the
God.
scene. So watch. All the cops see that, and he points to the fact that Sean. Look, they all start throwing up. Look, everyone's throwing up.
This is
Dan Marino's throwing up.
Okay,
They all
so
start-
with the-
look,
so-
see how he's cleaning his mouth because he made out with her. Tone Loc. The Dolphins freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. It is so insanely transphobic.
okay. So what the left would say is the reason that they're right is that a movie like this won't get made anymore, and isn't that a good thing?
Maybe.
And
but
and
should they pull it? Should
Oh,
it,
no.
should it be illegal to have that
Oh,
on
come on.
iTunes?
of course not.
Oh, maybe someone on the woke left might disagree with you right now.
yeah, they
call
might.
you transphobic for defending this horrible, cisgendered, heteronormative
No, that's
piece of
horrible.
shit movie.
That's horrible. And what's crazy, and I guess this is a great thing. I mean, the remoralization project is working
Mm-hmm.
because when I saw that, I'm sure I don't know, what year did that come out?
95? 4?
Okay, so when I
5?
saw that as a
Yeah.
I don't know. I was born in 84. I can't do math.
I want to say 93. I want to say it was before I came to Hollywood.
Okay, when I
94?
saw that movie, I was 10.
Yeah.
Transphobia was not a thing.
No.
Now it is a thing.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, well, that's what we're
good
talking
news.
about when
But
things
the
are
question
changing
is,
so rapidly.
yes, but the question is, where are the lines being drawn, and is the Overton window being shrunk too small?
How do you feel about them pulling the Dukes of Hazzard off the air for the flag?
I don't know about that.
You didn't know about that?
No.
They pulled the Dukes
Wait,
of Hazzard.
do you understand? Do you understand how many of these there are a day?
There's so many.
Yeah. So no, I don't know that one. What's that one?
This one, they've yanked the Dukes of Hazzard off television forever because the Confederate flag was on the roof of the General Lee.
Did not follow this.
You didn't know that? You cannot watch the Dukes of Hazzard anymore. You cannot watch it. It's not on television anymore. It used to be on TV Land all the time.
Can you
Just a
get it on
good old
Netflix?
boy. Oh, fuck no. No chance. They're not going to show that goddamn awful flag.
I didn't follow this.
We have a poster in the bathroom over
Okay.
there of Leonard Skinner from
Okay.
like 1970 something, and they have a
I
giant
saw Janis
ass.
Joplin, I thought, in the bathroom. Other bathroom.
There's Jan's shop. Oh, that's the other bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a different bathroom.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's her mugshot.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great. But the Leonard Skinner one, they have a giant Confederate flag on stage, huge, enormous, in the background. That was their like Southern pride. This idea of Southern pride. It was okay to have that flag.
I'm basically for trying to, when it comes to the realm of art and movies and books,
Leave it alone.
try to leave it alone as much as possible is generally a very good strategy.
I agree.
Don't
And
want to be in the book banning, movie banning, TV banning business.
or editing. They tried to. Well, I think they did successfully, at least in some venues, edit Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn because the N-word was used prolifically. You know, I mean, the guy's name was Nigger Jim. That was the name in the book because that's how people talked back then. And I think we need to keep that stuff as a time capsule to show how racism was so
normative.
Yes.
Yes.
It's important
I agree.
to show the progress. Like Ace Ventura, like for trans
we need
people.
to keep him for history.
Yes.
It's Ventura.
For trans people, and it's amazing that no one's ever brought this up. I mean, I feel like this is something
I'm
that's
smelling
never
an
been
op-ed
discussed.
coming on from you, Joe Rogan, about the
I don't have the
importance.
time. I got shit to do. I got jokes to write.
All right.
But this is.
You got an Israel trip that I'm planning,
Oh,
and we'll go
Barry,
to the.
what are you doing to me, Barry? You're
What
dragging
am I
me over there.
doing? No, I'm not dragging you. I'm going to take you on an amazing
know.
trip, and then we're going to go to the West Bank, and you're going to see all this stuff,
Okay.
and you're going to come away with loving certain parts of it and not liking certain parts of it, and you're going to realize it's a country just like any other country.
Right.
But it is a democracy. And it's trying to do its best in a really rough neighborhood. And we'll go, I want you to see what the occupation looks like. I think that's something that's really important to see, to get a full picture of it.
I think you're probably right. I think it is an important thing for people to see. I think there's a lot of parts of the world that I need to see to really get a grasp.
Where do you want to go? Where are you going next in the world? Do you travel a lot?
Yes. I don't know. I mean, my family and I, we do a European vacation trip, but that doesn't really count. We just lounge.
That's just fun.
Yeah. Went to Thailand last year. That was fascinating.
Oh, cool.
Thailand was fascinating because and that was kind of a vacation trip too, but that's such a unique culture because Thailand is run by the king. Like if you even criticize the king, you're fucked. Like you're in real trouble. And his pictures everywhere. Everywhere there's pictures of him in the throne, like wearing like super nice clothes and looking good. But the people are so kind. They're so friendly. And they're always smiling, and they have, there's a lot of people that you'll run into that have very little, yet they don't seem to be having a problem with that. They wear flip-flops, you're on the highway, there's 3 people on a motorcycle, there's a baby in a basket, and I'm not bullshitting. It's
No
crazy.
helmets,
No
obviously.
helmet. No
Yeah.
helmet.
I have a
And-
friend that just went to Thailand, and she was like,
But the people are so nice. They're so nice. They're so kind. It's so unusual. And, me and my family, we always, whenever we go somewhere, we always have these real long conversations about, like, what was interesting about it for you. Like, what did you think? Like,
How
I try
old
to
are your
take
kids?
8 and 10, the young ones, and I have a 22-year-old, too.
okay.
All girls. Holla.
I'm from 4 girls.
Woo! Yeah, it's in the genes. But the what's fascinating to me about it is, well, first of all, I love exposing these little people to different parts of the world so they get to see like what this is like. Like here we are, like show them on the map. This is America. We're over here. But where the fuck? It took us 15 hours to get here. In a plane that goes 500 plus miles an hour. It's crazy. And just to realize like human beings are the same but different. We're the same everywhere. But there's a different way we choose to interact with each other. And one of the things that happens is we fall into their way when we go there. Like if we go to Italy, we say grazie. You try to
Move
start
your
learning.
hands a lot.
We'll just start trying to learn some of the words.
Yeah.
That these people use in their culture. And then I forget how you say it. Kapsum krab. I think that's how you say it. It's like hello and thank good morning. Yeah. But they all say that and everyone makes a lotus flower with their hands. It's so common. Everywhere you go, people greet you and they do this and it's such a warm, friendly peaceful way of greeting each other. And so one of the things that we talked about, I was like, notice how everybody's like way more friendly and like greeting, and this thing about clasping their hands together, and they all agree to do it, and everyone sort of, it's like this unique pattern that people can fall into, and people fall into all sorts of patterns. They fall into like really aggressive patterns of honking at people on the road and driving real fast, and then they fall into these peaceful patterns, and some of it's dictated by culture, some of it's dictated by climate, some of it's dictated by the economic situation of the world they're in. But it's such a weird trip to go to different places and see, like, okay, yeah, if I lived over here, this is how I'd rock it. I'd be wearing flip-flops and shorts, and I'd get around this way, and this is the kind of food that I would eat. And
Totally.
it's real spicy because, you kind of have those spices actually protect against bacteria because they're actually antibacterial.
Was the food great?
Fucking amazing. We took some took classes. We learned how to cook over there. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. But my kid got lit up by bugs. Woo! There's I think they're called tsetse flies. I think that's what they're called. I forget what they're called, but my youngest had a horrible allergic reaction to some of the bugs over there. You think like, okay, like what about there's
Deva makes bold choices.
You have no target. That's the wrong target.
Hold on a sec. Need to concentrate. Ion, guide your path.
Move closer to your target.
Ion's greatest gift to the weary traveler. Ion's greatest gift to the weary traveler. Wish I could travel more.
Ion has led you here.
Watch it! Dava nearly stepped on Shugo's tail! Nyark! Watch it! Dava nearly stepped on Shugo's tail! Nyark!
A fine day.
A fine day. May Ariel's light shine upon you.
Watch it! Dava nearly stepped on Shugo's tail! Nyark! Watch it! Dava nearly stepped on Shugo's... Watch it! Dava nearly stepped on Shugo's tail! Nyark!
Easy teleport, Dava? Ion guide your path. Easy teleport, Dava? Wish I could travel more.
There's